call to order the Thursday, August 3rd, 2023 regular meeting of the Boulder City Council. Welcome everybody, good to have you here. And we're going to start by asking for a motion to amend the agenda. We've got an item 8A to add, an update on homeless services, external evaluation, safe outdoor camping. Bob?
I move the amend the agenda as you just stated, Aaron, although I'd like to add an additional item to the agenda. Yes. I would like us, after we take roll, to sing happy birthday to one of our colleagues who has a birthday tonight.
Okay, we've got a motion to amend the agenda to add a new item 1A, singing for Tara's 65th birthday. Love it.
That's right.
All in favor? We have a motion and a second.
Hey,
Okay.
audience, they're singing happy birthday to me today.
Second, if you need one.
Yeah, we haven't called roll though. Yeah, so let's get to that first. All discombobulated by the birthday.
It's the antenna. Good evening, everyone. We'll start tonight's roll call as usual with Councilmember Benjamin.
Present.
Mayor Brockett.
Present.
Councilmember Folkerts.
Present.
Friend.
Here.
Joseph.
Here.
Spear.
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Wallach.
Present virtually.
Councilmember Weiner.
Present.
And Yates.
Right here.
Mayor, we have our quorum.
Very good. Bob, I'd invite you to repeat your motion if you don't mind.
I move to amend the agenda, as Aaron stated previously before the roll call, plus an additional singing of happy birthday to our colleague, Tara Wenner, whose birthday it is today.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. All in favor? Raise your hands. Okay, that's unanimous. The agenda is duly amended, and so Bob, perhaps you'd like to take the lead on our new item 1A.
I think we should acknowledge that Tara took her birthday, her special day. I would have taken the night off, Tara, and so we're happy to have you here voting and participating tonight. Hopefully we'll get you out of here early so you can have maybe a glass of wine before you go to bed. And Aaron, you have such a beautiful singing voice. Would you mind teeing us off here on a rendition of Happy Birthday to Tara?
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Tara. Happy birthday to you.
And many more.
Hey.
Roll out the candles.
Okay. So that concludes item 1A, which moves us to our item 1B, which is a declaration for pollinator and little creature appreciation fall equinox celebration presented by Councilmember Yates.
We have some guests tonight who are a little shy, maybe. Yeah.
You are cute.
She's got some things to say anyway. We're going to read a declaration here, and we have some guests who are going to join us. But before we do that, I think we have some information from staff.
So we're here tonight on what would be in September the 9th Pollinator Appreciation Month. But because we had a lot of wonderful artists and poets come together from our community for an exhibit in the library gallery that is going up next week, so it will be available on August 12th and run all the way through the end of September, we are expanding to celebrate all of the insects and other little invertebrates and creatures who are critical for the living systems that provide our air, water, and everything essential for life. We want to change people's perspectives about insects so that they love them and welcome them into our world. And each of you at council, and this is going to be available on the website for coolboulder.org, is a whole series of free events. And we have English on one side, Spanish on the other. And we're lucky to have Dr. Sammy Ramsey, amazing celebrity entomologist, doing our opening event. So if you'd like to come to that reception, please sign up soon because it's filling up. And we'll also have our 9th Bee Boulder Festival in September. And Cynthia Scott, one of our bee chicas who's hosted it all these years, is here to welcome you to come to that.
Yes, I just love to invite you all to come and be there. We have so many educational events for children and adults to learn about the biodiversity of our world and to get excited. So please join us in Central Park next to the Farmers Market on September 9th from 10 to 2.
And the children are why we're doing this for future generations, because it's critical that we take action now and provide hope and real action that's going to make a difference. And so with that, let's bring the kids up.
Thank you. Normally we read this off a piece of paper, but we're doing this electronically tonight. Can we have the kids come up and join us?
You guys want to go up and be ready?
Can you help me here, please? Hey, guys.
You don't have to go if you don't want to, Maggie.
Come on up. Come over here. Come on over here. Come here. Come on over here. All right. You guys want to sit down? Or you want to stand? You want to stand? Okay. You guys all look really, really good with your antenna up here. Oh, here she comes. All right. I love your costume. Can I read something to you guys and then we'll talk? Is that okay? Are you guys good listeners? Okay, let's read. I have to put my glasses on. This is all about insects. Celebrating boulders, pollinators, and little creatures. August and September 2023. Do you want to look over my shoulder here? There are over 1 million known species of insects and other invertebrates on Earth, including Boulder's 550 species of native bees, butterflies, beetles, flies, grasshoppers, praying mantis, and countless other tiny creatures that maintain the health and beauty of our grasslands, forests, meadows, wetlands, creeks, and other natural areas by providing services such as pollination, clean air and water, waste removal, and natural pest control. These tiny creatures are indispensable partners in the production of our food supply, and they are essential for diverse and thriving ecosystems that support all life. Insects, including critical pollinators, are declining precipitously through the world due to habitat loss, pesticide use, and climate change. This is placing our food security, natural environment, and human well-being in peril. We honor the legacy of those who came before us to protect the natural world and the outstanding beauty of Boulder. We pledge to learn more about insects and other invertebrates to protect them and to heal our land and strengthen our connection with each other by providing and joining together to share art, music, and series of workshops and events to inspire. You're stealing the show here, dude. Our community to create innovative and equitable solutions to appropriate and protect pollinators and other little creatures. As our community enjoys the bountiful autumn harvest and we witness the regeneration of our natural lands from the tireless work of these tiny creatures, the City Council of the City of Boulder, I know this is long, bear with me, declares August and September 2023 as a time to celebrate and appreciate little creatures, and commits to taking action in partnership with our community as we join together to protect all biodiversity for current and future generations. Was that a little bit long? What do you think? What do you think of that? That was a little long, yeah. We're all agreeing, that was a little long. Yay! Yay. Can you clap? All right. What, can I ask you what your name is? Jackson.
Jackson.
Jackson, do you have a favorite insect or bug?
Water.
What's that?
Roly-poly.
Roly-poly. Oh, good one. Ooh, right. And what's your friend's name?
Lucas.
Lucas. Lucas, what's your favorite insect?
Bees.
Oh, so that's
Ladybug.
Do you have a favorite insect?
Ladybug.
A ladybug.
Bugs, nice.
Favorite bug? Like a butterfly? A bee or a butterfly? We're just gonna stand here.
You have a favorite insect?
Butterfly.
You show us your
Oh, you have a butterfly costume? Oh my God, that's so beautiful. That is so fantastic.
Nice.
Very nice.
Do you want to come up and see yourself on TV as a butterfly?
You want to look over here? Come over here. How about that?
Oh.
Oh, that's fantastic. Well, Well, thanks to all the kids who helped us get that resolution put together, and we hope to see you all out at the events that Rella mentioned. Thank you.
Can we just adjourn the meeting after that on a high note?
I think it's all going to be downhill from here. Right. Well done. That was easily the most adorable thing that has ever happened on this dais. Thanks to all of our children pollinator supporters for coming and joining us. That was really wonderful. All right, and now moving to open comment, if we could please. And commenters, you got a tough act to follow there, but and if we could get the public participation guidelines, please, from Brenda.
Oh, I gotta follow that? All right, I don't even have an antenna. So I'll have to pretend. But thank you so much, Emily, for pulling up the slides. My name is Brenda Rittenauer. I am with our communication and engagement team. And it is my role in these meetings to help remind us of our guidelines to make sure we stay in a productive atmosphere throughout the evening. So we love to share with you that the city has engaged with community members to co-create a vision for productive, meaningful, and inclusive civic conversation. This vision was designed to support physical and emotional safety for community members, for staff, and for council members, and supports democracy for people of all ages, identities, lived experiences, political perspectives, and favorite bug choices. For more information about this vision and the community engagement process, you can visit our website, bouldercolorado.gov, and search for Productive Atmospheres in the search bar. Next slide, please. This is where I have to switch to paper because it gets too small on my screen. The following are examples of rules of decorum found in the Boulder Revised Code and other guidelines to support this vision. These will be upheld during tonight's meeting. All remarks and testimony shall be limited to matters related to city business. No participant shall make threats or use other forms of intimidation against any person. Obscenity, racial epithets, other speech and behavior that disrupts or otherwise impedes the ability to conduct the meeting are prohibited. Participants are required to sign up to speak using the name they're commonly known by, and individuals must display their whole name before being allowed to speak online. Currently, only audio testimony is permitted online. In person, participants are asked to refrain from expressing support or disagreement verbally or with applause, obviously with the exception of the declarations and the adorable recipients of declarations. Traditionally, support is shown silently through American Sign Language applause, or sometimes we call it jazz hands. And with that, we can move into open comment. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Brenda. All right, so we've got 8 in-person speakers and 4 virtual speakers, so I'll call 3 names at a time. If you can come up when your name is called, please. We've got Douglas Bent, Kristen Marshall, and Evan Ravitz. Douglas.
Good evening. My name is Douglas Bent. I'm a resident at 1850 Folsom Street. I'm also the president of the Homeowners Association there, but I'm here tonight primarily as my role as a resident. I do have a few slides. Here's the title slide. And really, I and many residents, not only our building in the area, are opposed to the location of the homeless daycare center at 1844 Folsom. That's immediately adjacent to 1850. We feel in the selection of the site, there's a great deal of emphasis placed on the centrality of the location for the people it intended to serve, i.e. the homeless, but that inadequate consideration was given to residents and businesses in the area. Specifically, there's been a lot of talk of how good the experiences have been at the North Boulder Shelter or at the Nest or other locations in the city in terms of not having a great deal of police activity. But I'd point out those are not in the center of Boulder. So my next slide, please. So 1844 and 1850 Folsom, that's between Folsom, between Canyon and Walnut, And I'm setting the neighborhood to go to 26th Street, which is where the Dairy Arts Center is. And in that one sort of super block, just the one super block of within a fairly narrow radius of the proposed location, there have been 26 police incidents just in the last 3 weeks. This is from the Boulder Police Department's dashboard series. The incidents have been, criminal mischief, assaults, breaking and entering, indecent exposure. There've also been a number of medical calls, which there's very little information given on those. There have been 5 calls of that. So I think
Douglas,
I'm going to go to
I'm
the
afraid
last slide.
your time is up, but if you could email us the rest of your comments, please.
Okay, I did. I just want to show the last slide, which is showing the number of children that used Stinton Park in that group, and again,
we'll look at
why it
that
feels
in our
curious.
email. Thank you for your testimony. So now I have Kristen Marshall, Evan Ravitz, and Patrick O'Rourke.
Hi, my name is Kristen Marshall. 3 billion. The Cornell Lab of Ornithology estimates that in the past 60 years, we have lost about 3 billion native birds from North America. If we remember that on May 18th, we had several children from Columbine speak to you. What will their life look like when they are 65? How many birds will be left? Will it be, in the words of Rachel Carlson, a silent spring? It is up to us to switch that behavior, to stabilize a bird population. What is one way we can do that? By increasing bird habitat and migration routes, or preserving them. And in particular, let's look at what is happening with the mitigation techniques that are proposed for the Goose Creek and Canyon 2 Mile Creek. Let's preserve the existing wildlife in those areas. Let's preserve it for those children from Columbine. Let's preserve it for life. Thank you.
Thank you, Kristen. Evan Ravitz, Patrick O'Rourke, and Michelle Rodriguez.
Hi. Tonight I'm talking about rotating the villain. Here's how it works. Mayor Brockett said for 6 years here that we should have a legal campground for the homeless. But since the 2021 election gave him a majority to do that, instead he led the decision to spend over $6 million the last 2 years on sweeps. Aaron had 6 years for virtue signaling using his musician's voice and Boulder baby talk to lull hopeful citizens into voting for him. But to move up in the political world, which he knows he wants since he tried for the State House, he has to take a turn as the villain to maintain the status quo. Last week, it was announced on the city hotline that instead of opening legal camps that worked so well in Denver that they're being greatly expanded, we're going to hire another consultant, which means we're back to 2017 when the city spent over $200,000 to hire homeless consultants. Back then, there were officially 400 homeless in Boulder. Now there's 800, even though about 30 die each year. You spent $6 million on sweeps in 2 years, so at least $10 million since 2016. This made thousands more enemies. Vandalism, crime, throwing feces at cleanup crews, and wildfires have exploded. So, to stop you wasting another 8 years, hundreds of lives, and $10 million or more dollars, I'm announcing the soft launch of a Never Buy Boulder campaign. If you don't have a camp open when the snow flies and the homeless die, I'll make it a priority to starve your pretty talking killing machine. Citizens, please watch the documentary All Governments
Evan,
Lie.
your time is up.
Free on YouTube.
Thank you. Now we have Patrick O'Rourke, Michelle Rodriguez, and Phoenix Liu.
I have a couple slides. I'll wait for them to. I'll get started. Good evening, City Council, Mayor Brockett. First of all, thank you for joining us last night at our membership meeting or party for Historic Boulder. Preservation is not an accident in this town. You know, we're here to work with the city. You're gonna see this is a picture of Boulder, and this is your East End bookend from 1940. The picture is larger. You'll see that there's trains there, but most importantly, the bandshell is there, and to the south of the bandshell is an open area, the park. The park is under review as we speak, because in May of this year, Historic Boulder, Friends of the Bandshell, and the Tea House bought and put an application in for a civic historic district. It was delayed, and it's delayed for a variety of reasons. One reason was to do a CLA. That's pretty supporting documentation there that open land there was there in the 1940s, and it's there today. Number two is the city. We were hoping that this city council would be the city council that votes on the civic historic district. It's going to be delayed. Unfortunately, we're working closely with the city staff, and we truly believe that the Landmark city staff is exceptional. Marcy and Claire, who's here today, is working with Historic Boulder, and we're going to bring forward a proposal to go before the City Council in February of next year. We agreed to a 60-day extension with a tolling agreement, and we think it was reasonable, and we thank the city staff for doing it. Next slide, if you would. This concerns me. One of the reasons that we want to be at the table is that is a picture of the Saddle Creek development on Boulder Creek at the mouth of Canyon. That wall is over 10 feet tall. It's a barrier. It doesn't belong there. It's over, I walked it off tonight before I came here. It's 450 feet long. Somebody dropped the ball. And the bottom one on the right is the current, that's 2,000 linear feet of chain behind this building. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Patrick. Now we have Michelle Rodriguez, Phoenix Liu, and Charlie Skira.
Hi guys, always got a lot to say. Tonight I want to concentrate and focus and bring attention to mental health crisis that's going on here in Boulder. I'd like to speak about a young man, a son of a friend of mine. His name's Trenton Dunham. You might recognize that. He made national attention with a 3-county crime spree. He's in the Boulder County Jail on a $1 million bond. He's been deemed not competent. As of September, he will have been sitting there for 2 years. He has had no mental health treatment. They just put in a motion 2 months ago to dismiss $1 million worth of charges and or give him a PR so that he could seek mental health. He's being held. He's sometimes getting his 2 hours a day out. They denied that today, and we learned today that he is number 91 on the list of people to get transferred out of here to the state mental hospital. He's been there without his glasses. He can't see in front of his face, literally legally blind without them. There's no conditions, I guess, for furloughs or any kind of writs for him to get out to get a current prescription. They've been denying him that. They denied him communication with his family. His mother has just gotten to speak to him for about an hour just a couple weeks ago. But that, to me, is the true definition of insanity. They denied the motion to dismiss his bond or his charges or to give him a PR so that he could get mental health. He now has a new court date set for October 26th. And they're going to try to see about getting him some contacts in. Reader classes don't work. his own public defender said, you know, of all the things you're worried about, to his mother, she said about his eyesight, I don't know about throwing anybody into blindness after they've lived being able to see on top of mental illness, but literally has been deemed mentally incompetent. And
thank you, Michelle. Now, Phoenix Liu, Charlie Skira, and Julie Van Domlin.
Finally made it. Third time's the charm. I'm Phoenix
Turn
Ilu.
Turn the mic up a little bit.
This way. Phoenix Ilu, ILU, the founder of Rising Phoenix Reiki and co-host of Experience Your Beyond Master Trance Channeling Circles. I wanted to expand myself into a new space, so this is the first time I'm stepping into a more political atmosphere, and I wanted to talk a little bit about my mission, whole systems integration, and my interest in learning more of, so I've put myself back into school after 10 years. I'm a single mom, and I'm interested in learning more about local economies, creating, establishing, and managing an interplanetary network of biodynamic permaculture eco-centers. I'm interested in looking at what it looks like to be able to revitalize both landscapes and cities, towns, all different areas of human life. And the more I'm stepping into my own healing business after 10 years of really trying to work to get there, I am starting to see the opportunities for integration between healing and the lifestyle that our modern day world, especially in America, offers. And so I'm just putting myself out there to learn more and step into a new space and be able to bring forward the ideas and things that I, as a visionary, have held for a very, very long time within myself. So I just wanted to come up and share, and now that I was finally able to integrate my own self, moved from South Boulder to North Boulder, so it's been hard to get here, but yeah, I was just happy to come and speak. So thank you for listening to me, and yeah.
Thank you, Phoenix. Now, Charlie Skira, Julie Van Domlin. Do we have Charlie in the room? Charlie? Julie, that puts you up next.
Good evening. I'm Julie Van Domlin. I'm the Executive Director at EFA, the Emergency Family Assistance Association. And as you know, we're one of the core safety net agencies serving our community. And I come to you tonight as the canary in the coal mine. What we are seeing are levels of need that we have never seen at EFA before. Prior to the COVID, we had about 300 households need food in the food bank a week. We're over 600 now, week after week. We cannot keep up with rental assistance. We're seeing the highest numbers of family homelessness that we've ever seen in our community. And all of this is at a stage where the safety net is not enough. And we come to you to ask you to make action on the minimum wage. You all came into office stating that you were interested in raising the minimum wage. A year and a half ago, the Boulder Consortium of Cities was supposed to set in place a process to look at that countywide. And since then, it's been crickets until we heard that the new plan is to lag it until 2025. So I don't think that meets the moment. Right now, there's about 10% of jobs in Boulder County that make less than $15 an hour. At EFA, we did a survey a couple months ago, and about 25% of the people that need our services make less than $15 an hour. From a racial equity lens, it's over 40% for Spanish-speaking people that use our services. So it's time. And what I suggest, I know that there is a long way to go to get where you probably want to go, but I ask that you consider making the first step, a down payment on equity, and to address the moment of crisis that we're seeing, to raise the minimum wage 15% January 2024, and then set a path for outer years. You have time to do a consultative process, and we don't have time to wait. It's really quite crucial at this moment.
Thank you, Julie. Sure, we have a question. Julie, we have a question for you.
2 minutes goes by really fast.
Sure does, yeah. I just had a question, Julie. So,
Yeah.
one of the things we talked about when we had this discussion was wanting to go together as a region. Is there anyone else who's talking about moving forward in 2024 versus 2025?
I'm probably not the one to ask, but I know the county commissioners are interested in the unincorporated parts of Boulder County. But there's nothing that stops you from saying, let's make that first step, let's try and adjust right now in our city that's so expensive, and then pull everyone together, catch up, take a pause year while others catch up. I mean, I really think there's no credibility anymore of saying, yes, we're gonna get all together and everyone on board before we make a move, because I've been hearing that for 2.5 years now, so.
Thank you.
Thanks. All right,
Thanks.
you, Julie. We're going to go to our remote speakers now. Our first three are Pete Carney, Lynn Siegel, and Tim Thomas.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Cool. I'm Pete Carney, and I would like to discuss the bus system here in Boulder. We have fairly good lines, but they don't run frequently enough for people to rely on them, which limits their usefulness. I want to focus on how improving this will help us towards some of our most important goals and be a win-win for everyone. The first is our Vision Zero goal. More frequent and reliable bus lines will encourage more people to use the bus instead of their car. Less cars on the road will lead to less opportunities for accidents. This won't by itself get us to Vision Zero, but it would be a big help. The second is climate change. This one is fairly obvious, but having less cars on the road leads to less CO2 emissions. And climate change is an issue that we need to address immediately if we want to solve it. The third is equity. I'm someone who has been able to own a car most of my life, but not everyone has this option. There are many here who can't afford a car, and they rely on public transit daily. Because of things like disabilities, weather, and distance, walking and biking are not always feasible options. By having this lackluster bus system, we prioritize car driving over public transit, which is prioritizing those of us who own a car over those who don't. Also, a better bus system also improves car driving for anyone who would still choose it. Less cars on the road leads to less traffic for people to deal with. I hear lots of discussion on reducing parking and disincentivizing driving. But instead of only making driving and parking worse options, we should incentivize use of the bus system by improving it to the point that more people will choose to use it. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Pete. Now we have Lynn Siegel, Tim Thomas, and Emily Reynolds.
Well, it's all about money, isn't it? And like Lynn always says, let the developers pay. That's the problem in Boulder. I see more parking reductions, height limitation increases, and then my catalytic converter gets stolen. How do these two things connect? More people desperate for funds. It's all in the system, more crime. So it's not sustainable. And meantime, we own Alpine Balsam site, and we're going to have a big development there. And the drugstore across the street leaves. There's no zoning requirement for a drugstore. I thought we're supposed to have 15-minute neighborhoods. Isn't zoning for particular types of businesses part of a 15-minute neighborhood? And speaking of 15-minute neighborhoods, we've got one that's a whole city within itself at Zocalo, Waterview, 55th, and Arapahoe. It's a huge city. That's what's called sprawl. That's like 213. That's what Jared is trying to avoid. And it's definitely sprawl. It's sprawl of a whole new city. And there's garages in every unit, and there's 300 some units. That's not the kind of development that Boulder needs. And it's anchored with a brew hub. That's a problem. Reinstate Caroline Miller or all of your boards are at threat. Done.
Thanks, Lynn. We have Tim Thomas and Emily Reynolds.
This is Tim Thomas. Can you hear me?
Yes.
My name is Tim Thomas. I'm a board member of Boulder Housing Partners Resident Representative Council. We are a separate group of residents. We started in my complex and another complex, the senior complex that I was visiting. We started receiving our yearly lease addendums, and a very disturbing thing has happened. The paperwork gives us an option of whether we want annual leases or month-to-month leases. The month-to-month leases were already checked. Not only that, but the paperwork was dated January 3rd. We received it on July 3rd. We received it on July 26th, and in many cases, the paperwork said it was due on the 26th. My mother's paperwork was dated July 3rd and said that it was due on July 1st. So we have contacted BHP, the upper management. We've asked them to bring us new paperwork. I haven't gotten any yet. I don't think my neighbor has gotten any yet. And this is the City of Boulder's Housing Authority. Councilmember Wallach actually serves on the
We're losing you, Tim.
Can you hear me?
You were fading out for a minute.
Okay, so long story short, BHP was giving us paperwork telling us that we had the choice of whether we had an annual lease or month-to-month lease, and the paperwork for month-to-month has already been checked out. A lot of people didn't realize their mistake and they've already handed it back. Can you please contact BHP, tell them to give us the correct paperwork that does not have the check mark and lets us choose annual leases as opposed to month-to-month. It was a very, I don't know, it just doesn't seem right. I'm holding the paperwork until they give us new ones. Thank you very much, and I hope you'll do something about this.
Thanks, Tim. Our last speaker tonight is Emily Reynolds.
Good evening, Council. Media, activists, and Council make false assumptions about landlord behavior related to Council's desire to increase occupancy. I don't think a majority of residents agree with that stance. The fiction goes like this. An additional person in a home would allow tenants to split the rent another way and make rents cheaper. The obvious flaw, the rent will remain unchanged if the landlord rents to more people. That's fantasy. Bedrooms are for people failed partly as there was no mechanism to require affordability. Voters saw through this. A house renting to 3 for $4,500 a month at $1,500 each would rent for $6,000 per month at $1,500 each if rented to 4 people, or for $7,500 if this council allows 5 people. Families will be priced out. Any proposal that doesn't require affordability is profoundly unlikely to create it. What are the effects on water, infrastructure, and transportation if more and more unrestrained occupancy is allowed? Planning Board was mixed on this, passing it by only 1 vote. Virtually all college towns have occupancy limits to maintain order. Boulder's recent survey of occupancy in 60 college towns showed that 60% allow only 3 or fewer unrelated people, and 38% only allow 2 unrelated people. So the argument that Boulder's occupancy limit of 3 unrelated persons is unusual is completely erroneous. Instead, staff continues to rely on the wildly unscientific Be Heard poll, which could be answered 100 or 1,000 times by 1 person. Please heed the people's vote against bedrooms people, which was an actual, genuine referendum on the question.
Emily, your time is up. Thank you for your testimony. And that brings open comment to a close. I'll turn to staff for any responses.
Thank you so much, Mayor. As always, we appreciate everyone sharing their voices, and we'll certainly be following up on a couple of things. I know that later on this evening, we'll be talking about the external evaluation of homelessness services and programs. I also know that staff continues to talk with area stakeholders about the Day Services Center. I know Parks is looking at activation of the parks. I know HHS and police continue to think about strategies, and we want to make sure that we are supporting our entire community as we move forward. And then lastly, I'll say that we are aware, I'm in receipt of an email that Mr. Thomas sent us regarding BHP leases. I know that HHS has it as well and will follow up. No need to follow up, Kurt, if you don't, we can do that by email, but just wanted to say we're aware and don't know if you wanted to add anything else, but no need if you do not feel the case. Don't you love when you're on the spot?
Good evening, Council. Kurt Fernhaber with Housing and Human Services. So after receiving Mr. Thomas's email, I did reach out to BHP today to understand his concerns better. So it's typical practice for after the first year, typically affordable housing residents get a 1-year lease on their first year. It automatically turns to a month-to-month after that. They can, if they wish, and desire, they can also have a full year lease as well. With the change in the state law, there's not a whole lot of difference because you can, with the state law, you can actually get out of a 1-year lease without paying penalties. It's actually advantageous for residents to have a 1-month lease because if their life changes and they want to, go into another unit, it gives them easier flexibility to do that. Increases in rent are done on a schedule, so whether you're on an annual lease or month-to-month lease, there's no impact on that. So I don't know if you have any further questions, but you can email them as well. Thank you.
Thanks. Anything from council?
Yeah, me.
I got Tara and then Nicole.
I just want to say, Aaron, that I'm sorry that you were berated by a community member tonight, and I know how tirelessly you work for this community. Just to me, public comment and community engagement are the most important thing. But if I had a birthday wish, it would be, I do have a birthday wish, that we can make our points with passion, but perhaps a little bit nicer, not putting each other down. So that's my birthday wish. Thanks.
Thanks, Tara. And if I could just colloquy, if you don't mind, Nicole, that speaking to Mr. Rabbits, we will be talking about additional solution for people experiencing homelessness later on tonight. We have a study session on safe outdoor spaces in September, I believe it is. So at least to talk about the notion. So continue to be in the works on these things. Nicole?
For 7 years, so far.
Thanks, Tara, for your birthday wish. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Tara.
And yeah, Aaron, hope you're doing okay. I just wanted to mention the person who was talking about the buses and what we can do to increase bus ridership. And we don't have as much control over service, but RTD did just allow us to, or not allow, but 19 and under are going to ride free. So for anybody who is age 19 or under, that vote did pass. You will be able to ride free. Also, other passes are decreasing pretty substantially for the year ahead. So hopefully that will help more folks make use of the services as RTD starts bringing back more services to Boulder.
Thanks for that, Nicole, and thanks RTD for those changes. Rachel?
Just a real quick, maybe a PSA, as I'm on my way off this dais. I am trying to help us as a city to really focus on our lane and the things that cities do, and also to encourage people to reach out, like in the case that Nicole just mentioned, to RTD. If it's something that's more RTD's lane, make sure that you're also reaching out to them, because it's great for us to know, but we don't make the bus routes. Likewise, somebody mentioned jail and mental health, and maybe some more behavioral health services that the county might want to take up. So want to just recommend you could also go and speak to the county commissioners who do have, we don't have a health department, that is the county's lane. So just flagging for the community that there are other agencies that also it's great to flag some of these concerns for, because sometimes it's not quite our lane or domain. Thanks.
Can I colloquy on that? Rachel, do you have an email address for the county commissioners? Does anyone?
Not off the top of my head, but it's a great idea.
And also, Rachel, I want to point out, you still have 4 months left, so don't just try and walk off the stage early here. Anything else? Seeing none, Elisha, if we can go to our consent agenda, please.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Our consent agenda is item 3 tonight, and it consists of items 3A through 3E.
Any comments or questions on the consent agenda? I got Bob and then Rachel.
Maybe this is, I don't know, Carl Geiler, who's owning 3B? Is that Brad, is that you?
3B, this is the occupancy.
I'm sorry, the occupancy on first reading, item 3B.
Yes, good evening. Brad Mueller, Director of Planning and Development Services.
Thanks, Brad. Brad, I just want to make sure that I understood 3B. I'm going to be voting against it tonight, but I want to first very much be grateful to you and your staff for accommodating the request of council a few weeks ago of taking a look at the non-conforming use areas and maybe perhaps carving those out of an occupancy increase if that's the will of council. I did want to ask a question, so thank you for that. And a question, I think the ordinance that's in front of us, 8585, follows your option A, which is to make that non-conforming use exception citywide. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. I think that's all I had.
Okay.
Thanks.
Rachel?
Yeah, I think this is the right time to say that I need to disclose as to 3B, the occupancy issues. I do have a short-term rental license, and a community member wrote into council that those of us who have rental properties maybe should recuse, so I have investigated and do not believe that my having Airbnb'd my home out some 5 nights over the last 4 years compromises my ability to remain impartial, so I will not be recusing.
Anything else or a motion?
Well, don't need crickets. I'll make a motion to pass the consent agenda.
Second.
Okay, we got a motion and a second. Any further discussion or any discussion on the motion? Yeah, Matt?
As Bob brought up occupancy, we at second reading we'll be having a public hearing on this. So just so people want to come out and talk and express their desires one way or the other, public hearing will be a good chance. So know that that's coming.
2 weeks from tonight, August 17th.
August 17th.
Don't miss it. Did you have something? No. Okay. We got a motion and a second. If we can do a roll call, please, Elisha.
Yes, sir. Thank you. We'll start the roll call for the consent agenda with Councilmember Friend.
Yes.
Joseph?
Yes. Yes.
Thank you. Spear?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Walling?
Yes, but no on 3B.
Thank you, sir. Councilmember Weiner?
Yes, but no on 3B.
Yates?
Yes, but no on 3B.
Thank you. Benjamin?
Yes.
Mayor Brockett?
Yes.
Councilmember Folkerts?
Yes.
The consent agenda items A through E are hereby approved unanimously with the duly noted nays of 3B from Councilmember Weiner, Yates, and Mayor Pro Tem Walling.
Thanks, Elisha. Can we do our call check-ins now, please?
Thank you, sir. Call-up check-ins are item number 4 on tonight's agenda. 4A is the extension of call-up period and landmark alteration certificate to remove a fence at the property north of 200 Galadaria Lane in the Chautauqua Park Historic District pursuant to Section 9-11-18 of the Boulder Revised Code 1981.
Any interest in calling this one up? I'm not seeing any. We can go to the next one, please.
Item 4B is the site review amendment to amend the Orchard PUD to expand the property at 1576 Hawthorne Avenue to include adjacent common area. This is reviewed under case number LUR 20-2022-00024.
Anybody want to call this one up? Not seeing any interest. So the next one, please.
Item 4C is the use review for a 7,062 square foot patio expansion of a restaurant use with associated landscape improvements at 4910 and 4920 Nautilus Court North. This is reviewed under case number LUR 2022-00028.
Any interest in this one? Seeing none, that's it for our call-ups. So if we can move to our first public hearing, please.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Our public hearings are item 5 on tonight's agenda. 5A is the extension of call-up period. I'm sorry, I'm reading the wrong thing. My apologies. Too many papers. My apologies, sir. Thank you. 5A is the second reading and consideration of a motion to adopt ordinance 8580, designating the property at 830 14th Street, City of Boulder, Colorado, to be known as the Powers House as an individual landmark under Chapter 9-11, Historic Preservation, BRC 1981, and setting forth the related details.
We will go straight to staff on this one. Thank you, Marcy.
Thank you, Marcy Gerwing, Planning and Development Services. Good evening, Council. Let's see if we could go. Oh, I have the next slide. Okay, I'll first start with the procedure. First, we'll start with Council revealing any ex parte contacts. Then I'll give a staff presentation followed by any questions Council may have. The owner will then have a chance to present. I believe they are listening in but don't plan to speak this evening. And then following that, the public hearing is open for public comment, followed by council questions. Then the public hearing is closed and council discusses, and a motion requires an affirmative vote of at least 5 members to pass the motion. So I'll turn it back over to you, Mayor, for ex parte contacts.
Do we have any ex parte contacts? Seeing none, I'll send it back to you, Marcy.
Wonderful. Thank you. And before I begin, I would just like to thank the property owner for nominating their house as an individual landmark. It's actually already designated in the University Place Historic District, but they wanted to recognize it individually. And I'd also like to thank Claire Brandt, who's here, the other historic preservation planner, who did a remarkable job in the history of this application. So the criteria for your decision tonight is found in section 911.1 and 911.2 of the Boulder Revised Code, and that is that the proposed designation will preserve, protect, and enhance historically significant buildings and sites or architectural styles of the past, and to develop and maintain appropriate settings to enhance property values, stabilize neighborhoods, promote tourist trade and interest, and foster knowledge of the city's living history. The options in front of you tonight are to either approve the designation by ordinance, modify and approve the designation, or deny the designation. This application began in March of this year when the property owner submitted an application to designate their property as an individual landmark. The Landmarks Board unanimously recommended that Council approve the designation at their hearing on May 3rd, and then it was on the first reading for the consent agenda on June 15th, and then here we are this evening in August for the public hearing. This property is located on the east side of 14th between Aurora and Cascade in the University Place Historic District, which is just north of Baseline in University Hill. It is a craftsman bungalow built in 1920 and is remarkably intact to its original construction. Here are a few photos going around the house. Notably, it's a side gabled form with a front dormer and helical piers, or tapered piers, which are typical of craftsman bungalow houses. In terms of its historic significance, it's significant for its 1920 date of construction and its association with Kate Mayhofer Powers and Patrick Powers in family. And Patrick Powers was a prominent miner who had interest in Weld County in the Shamrock mine. And he didn't live in the house. It was mostly occupied for a long time by his wife, Kate. And so the name is intended to recognize both of the owners. It's significant for the development of the community as part of the University Place Historic District, which was designated in 2006, and it is identified as a contributing resource to that historic district. In terms of its architectural significance, it's recognized as an excellent example of the craftsman bungalow style. We don't know who the original architect or builder is, but it's possible that the fellow who owned the property the year before it was built and built other houses in the neighborhood, his name was Alonzo Denham. It's possible that he constructed the house. It has artistic merit for its craftsman detailing, demonstrating masonry and vernacular design skill. And in terms of its entire environmental significance, it's within an already designated historic district, so that retains a high level of integrity. It's consistent with the compatibility of the existing neighborhood, and it's centrally located within the University Place Historic District. The proposed boundary follows the property lines, which is best practices, and the proposed name is the Powers House, recognizing Kate and Pat Powers. So with that, staff and the Landmarks Board recommend that council designate the property at 830 14th Street to be known as the Powers House as an individual landmark. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thanks so much. Any questions? We're a little light on the dais here at the moment. We're gonna have to get some people back to have a vote. So I understand that this would be the owner's chance to speak, but they're turning down that opportunity?
Right. I think they're listening in, but opted not to speak this evening.
Very good. Then let's go ahead and open our public hearing. We have one speaker, Lynn Siegel. Lynn, you've got 3 minutes.
Sorry, Lynn. Give me just one moment to get your microphone. My screen is not popping up. Okay, here we go.
Of course you want to landmark this. Of course. I don't even know why it came all the way to council, because 777 Circle didn't even make it to the Landmarks Board. And it was the architect they knew, James Hunter, who designed, you know, the Masonic Temple, the which is now the Museum of Boulder, Baseline Junior High, you know, the municipal building, like James Hunter. This was a James Hunter 771 Circle, and it swept through LDRC without a hitch. Nothing. Demoed. $6.1 million. Flagstone, like all the James Hunters, with 2 other houses nearby. A Charles Hartling that Linda Jorgensen had, who was a mayor of Boulder, or a council member, I don't remember, and a Usonian that was also a James Hunter, the only house on the way up Flagstaff, within 3 houses of it. It is demoed. Unbelievable. You need to open up LDRC to be recorded, because I can't go back to the recording and see what the heck happened there. This is a dark place in Boulder's history when you can hide LDRC proceedings.
So Lynn, we're talking about 830 14th Street tonight. Did you want to speak to that topic?
Yep, we sure are. And that's an example of the fact that I can't trust the Landmarks Board at all now, because LDRC is not recorded. Now, I agree that this place should be landmarked, clearly. You know, it's a craftsman, a great place. But I don't trust Landmarks Board, and that's a big problem for the city of Boulder. Big problem. This is just not okay to go on like this. LDRC has to be recorded. It is no longer administrative. When we had a James Hunter taken down that just swung through LDRC without even being referred to the Landmarks Board, much less the City Council. Now, I'm sure you're going to go ahead and landmark this place, but what about 777 Circle? My God, I can't believe what this city does. It's so inappropriate. Done.
Thanks, Lynn. So that brings us to the close of our speaker list. So I'll close the public hearing and bring it back to City Council for a discussion. Would anyone like to address the landmarking matter before us? Or maybe even make a motion? And it's right up on there, too.
All right, let's go for it. Make a motion to adopt ordinance 8580, designating the property at 830 14th Street, City of Boulder, Colorado, to be known as the Powers House as an individual landmark under the City of Boulder's Historic Preservation Ordinance.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Did you all want to speak to that at all? No? Okay. Yes, Lauren.
I just wanted to thank the owners for bringing this forward as an option for us.
I'll call on myself and second that thank you to the owners, and also Marcy for your excellent analysis of the historical qualities of the building. And with that, do we need a roll call on this, Alicia? Let's go for a vote.
Yes, sir. Thank you. We'll start the roll call for item 5A with Councilmember Joseph.
Yes.
Yes. Spear?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Wallach?
Yes.
Councilmember Weiner?
Yes.
Yates?
Yes.
Benjamin?
Yes.
Mayor Brockett?
Yes.
Councilmember Folkerts?
Yes.
And Friend?
Yes.
Ordinance 8580 is hereby adopted unanimously.
Very good. Thanks again, Marcy.
Thank you.
All right, if we can move to our second public hearing, please.
Yes, sir.
And hopefully we don't have to read every word that's in the agenda.
Hey, I got it down to a science.
All right.
All right. Second public hearing is item 5B on tonight's agenda. It is the second reading and consideration of a motion to adopt the following ordinances related to the 2023 ballot measures of the city. Our first ordinance is 8586, related to the petition of safe zones for children. Safe zones for kids. Our second item ordinance is 8587, which is related to charter changes related to election procedures. Item 3A is the ordinance 8588, related to the extension of the 0.15 cents sales tax extension. Item 3B is the alternate ordinance 8591, related to the 0.15 cents city sales tax extension. And item 4 is related to 8589, the question of the extension of the 0.15 cents sales tax related to the Arts for Boulder petition.
That was fairly succinct for all that. I want to thank staff. There's been a lot of staff behind the scenes working on a variety of these items, but for now, we will send this over to our Deputy City Attorney, Erin Poe.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and members of Council. Erin Poe, Deputy City Attorney. I will be the main presenter tonight, though I have backup with Alicia Johnson, our City Clerk, John Morse, our Elections Administrator, and Cara Skinner, our Chief Financial Officer. Next slide, please. Tonight we have 5 measures for Council consideration. My plan is to break the format into 2 halves. In the first half, we have the Safe Zones for Kids initiative and charter amendments which propose changes in the city clerk election processes. Then I'll pause and have questions on those measures. In the second half, we have 3 measures relating to the extension of a 0.15% sales and use tax. There is a petition measure, a conflicting city measure, and a compromise measure. And then we'll have questions again at the end. Next slide, please. All right, the Safe Zones for Kids petition is Ordinance 8586, and it proposes adding a subsection C to Boulder Revised Code 8-3-21 that would prioritize removal of prohibited items such as tents and propane tanks on city-owned property within a radius of 500 feet from any point on a school property line or within 50 feet on both sides of any multi-use path or sidewalk. In order to have the same go dark date for all ballot items, staff recommends no action on this item tonight. It would move forward to August 17th for final action. Council does also have the option of adopting this language as an ordinance in lieu of placing it on the ballot. Next slide, please. All right, and then our charter amendment measure is Ordinance 8587. This would amend sections 27, 37, 39, 46, and 57 of the Boulder Home Rule Charter. The amendments would have the goal of giving the city clerk additional time to perform election duties, and would also remove the requirement that people who wish to sign petitions in support of mayoral or city council candidates do so in person before the city clerk. The clerk would have 5 additional days to process petitions, and the deadline to submit signatures moves from 150 days before an election to 160 days. The amendments would also clarify that it is state law that governs the process to amend the city's charter. And next slide, please. So our next steps reflect the preference of having one go dark date of August 17th for all ballot items. The go dark date is the date that a ballot title is fixed and after which city resources cannot be used to fund express advocacy. So for our Safe Zones for Kids Ordinance 8586, staff recommends no action tonight and that this item be brought back to council on August 17th for final action. And for charter amendments, Ordinance 8587, staff also recommends no action tonight and that the item be brought back to council August 17th for final action. All right, and are there questions on these first 2 measures?
Bob?
I think I know what you mean, Aaron, but I want to make sure that we're all on the same page. When you say no action on these 2 items, and I know you're going to maybe recommend something similar for some of the other ballot measures in a second, you still propose we have a public hearing tonight, but then that we continue the public hearing and take our vote on second reading on these 2 items on August 17th. Is that correct?
That's correct. It could be, this is the public hearing, the time for a public to address it. It is legislative, so having the hearing tonight, I believe that they could be passed on consent on August 17th.
Great, so public hearing but no vote.
Correct.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, thanks, Aaron. You can move to the next section, please.
All right. Okay, and on the second half, we have an extension of a 0.15% sales and use tax. As background, the current tax expires December 31st, 2024. It was last approved by voters in November 2003. Its general purpose is described as to fund fire, police, human services, library services, arts and cultural programs, parks, and other general fund services. And the tax revenue is expected to be $7.25 million in 2024. Next slide, please. Thank you. We have 3 tax extension measures. The first is Ordinance 8589, which is sponsored by the petition group Arts for Boulder. It would earmark 100% of tax revenue for arts, cultural, and heritage purposes. Second, we have Ordinance 8588, which is the staff proposal and has been drafted to conflict with the Arts for Boulder petition. It would extend the current general purpose tax and dedicate 100% of tax revenue to the general fund. And third, we have Ordinance 8591, which is a compromise ordinance that would split the tax revenue 50% to the general fund, 50% to arts, cultural, and heritage programs. The Arts for Boulder petitioners have proposed language amendments to their measure 8589 and the compromise measure 8591. These changes are supported by staff, and in the next slide, we'll talk about those a little bit more. Staff met with representatives from the Arts for Boulder Committee to discuss the ordinances as part of the Charter Section 48 requirement to seek input from an initiative committee prior to council setting the ballot title. The petitioners requested that the City Council consider minor amendments to the ballot question related to the initiated petition and the compromise tax question. On the title related to the petitioner's measure 8589, the committee requested that the format of the question be reorganized to be consistent with the other tax extension measures considered by council. They requested moving the language "and all earnings thereon retained and used as a voter-approved revenue change under Colorado Constitution, Article 10, Section 20, and any other laws limiting the receipt or expenditure of revenues" to the end of the question. They also requested a modification to the language describing the revenue earmark to more clearly describe its purpose. For the compromise measure 8591, the committee requested a modification of the language describing the revenue earmark to more clearly describe the purpose and more succinctly. Staff believes that the requested amendments meet the legal requirements of 4 ballot titles should council decide to pass these amendments. Next slide, please. So there are 2 options that staff recommends council consider moving forward. The first would be to move forward with 2 conflicting tax extension measures, which would be the petitioner's 8589 with 100% of funds going to cultural and arts purposes, and the staff proposal 8588 with 100% of revenue to the general fund. If conflicting measures appear on the ballots, by charter, the question that passes with the highest number of votes becomes law. Option 2 is the compromise ordinance 8591, which would split tax proceeds 50% to the general fund, 50% to arts, cultural, and heritage programming. If the compromise option is pursued, it would require the cooperation of the Arts for Boulder Committee to withdraw their petition. In both options, council will need to decide if it will pass the amendments requested by the committee of the petitioners. Next slide, please. So for next steps, regardless of the option chosen by council, staff recommends the following: that council take no action for staff recommended ordinance 8588. That would be 100% of tax revenue to the general fund. That item would move to August 17th for final action. That council amend and pass on second reading the petitioner's ordinance 8589 with 100% going to arts, culture, and heritage programming. And amend and pass on second reading the compromise ordinance 8591. Under this proposal by staff, all 3 ordinances would move to final action on August 17th, pending council's decision in the status of the petition. If council elects to move forward with the compromise option, the committee of the petitioners must withdraw its petition, and then the compromise ordinance would be finally passed. If the committee of petitioners did not withdraw its petition, then council could still move forward with the 2 conflicting ordinances 8588 and 8589. If, on the other hand, council decides to move forward with the conflicting ordinances 8588 and 8589, then the compromise ordinance, there would be no final action taken on August 17th. And that is the end of my presentation, and I will stop again for questions.
Got one, Bob, and then Matt.
I've got one for Aaron and then one for probably the finance team. Do you want me to just do the one for Aaron right now and then hold off in finance?
Sure.
Okay. So Aaron, that was all very clear, so thank you very much. I know it's kind of confusing, so thank you for organizing that for us.
You're very welcome.
The one question I have is we did receive a note from one of the leaders of the arts organization today indicating that it was their intention to not withdraw the petition until after August 17. And so we have a little bit of a conflict there. Obviously, if they do before August 17th, then we have some clear decisions to make. If they want to withdraw it after they see us move, let's say, for example, the compromise ordinance forward on the 17th, and then for some reason they didn't withdraw, would we have time to fall back to the alternatives, I guess we'd have to call a special meeting or something like that, because we're up against the county clerk deadline, right?
That's correct. I believe the county clerk deadline, and Alicia, please correct me if I'm wrong, is September 8th. So I believe there would be one final potential meeting where council could take action to repeal anything that needed to be repealed if the petition was not withdrawn.
Just to clarify, Councilmember Yates, the September deadline date is the date we have to have it to the county.
Right, so you really need us to pass it before then.
Exactly.
Okay. I know one of the representatives of the petitioners is here to speak at public comment, so maybe he can talk about whether they intend to file their withdrawal before or after the 17th, because I think it does affect our procedure, right?
Correct. I would recommend keeping as many options available for as long as you can.
Okay, thanks. I'll have a question, but I can park it, Aaron, later on, just for the finance team around how this would all work, but I'll save that for later.
Great. I got Matt, Rachel, and myself.
Bob asked my question about the cadence on withdrawal, so thanks.
Are we still being asked to change some title language for any of the measures?
Yes, the Arts for Boulder Petition Committee has requested changes to 8589, which is their petition measure, and to 8591, which is the compromise measure.
So you may recall that we were asked to change a ballot title a year or so ago and did not, and said we could not. So is there a distinction here that would be relevant to explain?
Yes, and
so the
I'll turn it
community would know?
over to our city attorney.
Thanks for the question. So the difference here is that last year we were considering a referendum, and this year we're considering an initiative. Under the city's charter, an initiative requires consultation with the petitioners. And so that consultation falls under the section of the charter that describes what a ballot title must contain. And that it must contain, and forgive me, I'm not going to quote it exactly correctly, but a clear and concise statement supported by facts and not argument. And so that consultation is in furtherance of setting a ballot title. No such authority is granted to the city council for a referendum. And so that's why last year you were unable to change a title because you didn't have the authority to do so, where here you do because it's an initiative.
Thank you.
That was very clear, Teresa. Thanks so much. All right, I'll call on myself, and then, or Nicole, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that you'd like us to wait if we've got some kind of finance-related questions.
Yeah, well,
Okay.
let's handle those here in a minute and stick to our ballot measure process questions. So, Aaron, a question for you in terms of what you were recommending on amending and passing on the second readings. And I just, you're saying that we should pass 8591, as part of that process. And I just wonder if perhaps we might consider only passing 8591 if that's the will of council to put that on the ballot rather than the alternatives. It feels like maybe we potentially make that decision tonight rather than on the 17th, but I wanted to get your thought on that.
You could do that, and we did think of proposing it that way. However, passing it on second reading tonight, passing and amending it, would still require a third reading to finalize it. So I think that's a preference of council. If you prefer to take it off the table tonight, you don't have to pass it. If you want to keep that door open, you could move it on where it would need a third reading.
Sure.
So it's a sort of connected question to that. And I say this out into the ether to the Arts for Boulder folks in particular, one of them's here, is if we were to scrub the other 2.15 ordinances and only move forward with the compromise, might that be enough of a gesture of moving forward from which we could alleviate that sort of scheduling bind we get into with regards to the withdrawal of the petition maybe after the third reading and say, look, this is the only one on the table. We're all in this together, and maybe there might be a withdrawal on the front end so we don't get into that sticky situation with the 17th. So I don't know if that's a viable place to go, but I'm wondering if we can kind of be in good faith there.
I won't speak to their interpretation of that, but yes, if you did not move those forward tonight, it would not be your last opportunity to do so. If we needed to do it because the petition something broke down and it was not withdrawn, I'm sure it would not be Alicia's first choice, but we could find another meeting and call a special meeting.
Great, thanks for that, Erin. And so I'll ask council for their direction when we get to our deliberations, but just, I guess, one thought is to potentially make our decisions tonight so that the 17th can be quick and easy, potentially. Okay, so that's it for questions on these slides. Did you want to continue, Erin?
But those were all the slides that I had.
Great. In that case, I think we have some finance-related questions, so maybe we can invite our finance team up. And Bob, if you want to start.
Do you want us to switch out with Erin, or we were just?
I mean, you can just come
It's
up.
just
to
from
the
there.
podium.
These will be good.
We'll both take the mic.
You just want to identify yourself.
Sure, Mark Wolf, Budget Officer.
Kara Skinner, Chief Financial Officer. Good evening.
Good evening. Thanks, guys. Hey, we've had a few members of the community who are maybe more on the human services side of things express to some of us some concern that if we did adopt the compromise measure, which would have about half of the general fund tax extension going to arts and the other half staying with the general fund. And I know that none of this goes into effect till January 1, 2025, right? The concern that was expressed, and maybe I'd like to invite you to address is, do you feel, I know you're looking into a crystal ball a year and a half from now, do you feel that if there was that increase in funding for the arts with the 50-50 compromise, there would still be adequate funding, based on what you know now, to continue to support our various human services programs?
I'll take a crack at that. So I think, as we mentioned before, budgeting is tough. Our choices are very tough. I think, to be clear, based on what we're putting together for the 2024 budget, and we'll dive into in earnest in a few weeks from now, we're not anticipating that the compromise would force us into any reductions, direct cuts. I think the concern that we have raised in May and June is just with all of the needs, and certainly human services being one of those key areas in community, restricted funds in general limit our ability to address those emerging needs. So I think it's a long answer to say we don't anticipate any sort of direct reduction, but certainly it makes our choices that much more incrementally difficult.
Thanks, Mark.
Any other finance questions? Yeah, Nicole.
Yep, I've got some. Thank you. So one of the questions that I had was just around the sort of scope of what we're talking about here, right? So we're talking about 20 years of a 0.15% tax. So what's sort of the amount that you would expect over 20 years?
So we anticipate our initial estimate was about $7.5 million for the 0.15. That was an average of our 5-year projections. So if you just took that out over 20 years, it generate about $150 million over the life of the tax.
Okay, so in our typical budget process, if we were going to allocate $150 million to a specific program within a specific department, what would the engagement process typically look like for something like that?
It's a good question. I think with any significant investment, we typically have robust engagement. We're working on it on the budget process, which we'll talk about a bit later this year. I think a good example is with CCRS comes to mind as a significant capital tax, and that's over many, many years, but certainly a lot of engagement with community and identifying total need and determining what ultimately the top projects were as a part of that investment. And so similar as we're looking at any other sort of major investment, as engaging with community, understanding total need, and trying to do some type of prioritization.
Thank you. And one of the things that I've been hearing from community members is, well, we've got the money that's freed up from the library district, which, you know, seems like it should be a significant amount. Can you talk a little bit about that, and if that's sort of money that's available to tap into?
Sure. It does help. So about $9.2 million for 2023 was made available because of the creation of the library district. As we've talked about with council before in May and June, we have tapped into those funds to fund some key council and community priorities. It includes the behavioral health or care program. That's about $1.8 million projected in 2024. Day Services Center, that's projected at around $6 million in '24. We also tapped that resource for alpine balsam, so anticipating some debt service or partnership dollars that we'll need to program within the general fund. And then we suggested back in May, I believe, to hold the rest of those funds in case something happened with the .15, right? So we never anticipate voter action, so if it were not to be renewed or if it were to be dedicated for another purpose. So that's kind of the constraints that we face within the library resources, and it helps kind of cover a 50-50 compromise portion. And then, as I mentioned in addressing Councilmember Yates' question, our choices then kind of become pinched or difficult as we move into 25 and beyond that. But certainly the library dollars help us address those initiatives, those resources that we talked about.
Thank you. And then one of my other questions was around just the why some of the organizations that had been getting funded by these arts and culture grants did not, and I don't know if this is maybe more of a question for you, Matt, but
it's a Matt question.
You know, I thought that in our 2023 budget we had increased the budget for the arts grants by like 20% or so, and that when we had taken money from some of the funds that we'd set aside for doing energy assistance for low-income families and things of that nature. So I'm just curious about how come they still have not gotten funding, even with arts funding increasing over the years.
Thank you, Councilmember Spear. Matt Jasansky with the Office of Arts and Culture, and there was an increase in funding to fill some gaps that the scoring that the Arts Commission did around the grants program. They scored several organizations high, but there wasn't enough money to fund in especially the general operating support category, or big category. And so that funding did indeed expand the number of grants that went out. And so many organizations did receive funding. Five organizations did receive funding through that. And I want to point out also, with the additional allocations from the ARPA grant, we were able to mobilize some more grants. So I'm not quite sure about the gap that's mentioned, but there was additional funding that did went out, and it did fill the gaps that the Arts Commission noticed.
Okay, thank you. And one more question, I think probably for you, Matt. So we're going to be updating our cultural plan very soon, right? Is there anything about that update process that you think might change the nature of how we do these grants? So, I mean, it occurs to me, if we move forward with putting just a single ballot measure on that is a 50-50 split, one of the things we're doing is not just locking ourselves into funding, but also into a specific program, kind of type of program as well. Do you see anything coming up that might change how we would want to do that in the next couple decades that would potentially be problematic, being locked into not just funding, but also a program?
Well, I don't want to comment on what the outcome of the vote might be, but I will say that over the course of the first 9 years of the cultural plan, there have been some things that we've noticed that have been enormously successful that we think should move on, and some things that we could probably improve. But overall, the grants program has been very successful. There's been great outcomes. And so I would say that the conditions in the cultural sector lead us to believe that we'll largely continue the way that we have been.
Great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Nicole.
Appreciate Nicole making some good questions, but just to sort of maybe clarify, with regards to sort of engagement, I would expect, and Matt, this may be a question for you, that like with, and sort of connects to two things, with just about any department and who gets any dedicated money, whether it be parks, open space, you name it, the master planning process is the vehicle from which we define engagement, and we set that community and collaborative vision for the next 10 years for what we do with that money as it serves that community. Is that just correct? Because I just want to make sure that there's nothing different about how this money's set aside for the arts and how we engage the community with then how we use that money. Is that correct?
As far as the cultural affairs goes,
yes. And Matt, you might come a little
closer. I apologize. As far as the Office of Arts and Culture goes, or the cultural affair plan goes, that it's an advisory guideline. I can't speak to what might require us because of a dedicated tax. I don't know if you want to speak to that, but that the cultural plan that exists now had deep community inquiry, and we follow that because it was a vision of the community, and that's something we wanted to fulfill, not because of any sort of regulatory thing that I'm aware of. But
Fantastic. Great. No, that answers the question. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Any other questions? Mark?
Thank you. That was a great presentation. I'd like to ask a question, just one, of the finance people. You've said that you can handle the choices that would have to be made with respect to the dedicated funds and the compromise. When you do so, are you assuming that the base funding of 1.8 million that is currently received by the arts community remains, or that the 3.3, 3.75, whatever it is, funding that will occur from the initiative will be covering it all? In other words, are you prepared to make choices at 3.75 deduction from general fund revenues, or at 5.4?
Hi, Mark. Happy to answer that question. I was alluding to figures that we were assuming with the current arts and culture budget being a part of that 50%. So that would be that half of the 0.15 tax would be inclusive of current funding and new funding.
Thank you.
Is that it, Mark?
That's all I got.
Any other questions? Seeing none, why don't we move to the public hearing? We've got 8 people signed up. We've got 2 in person and actually 7 people signed up, 5 virtual. Each person will have 3 minutes to speak. Our in-person speakers are Daphne Rubin and Nick Forster. So Daphne.
Hi there. My name is Daphne Rubin, and I'm speaking on behalf of Safe Zones for Kids. So first, I'd like to thank council members and the city staff, Aaron, for their assistance in preparing this measure in appropriate form for the November ballot. Safe Zones for Kids is a pro-safety for young people in the areas around schools and on the pathways they use to get to and from school. School is where our young people spend most of their time. They have to be there. They have no choice in the matter. All of our young people deserve a school environment free from the threat of exploding propane tanks, used needles, illicit drugs, and weapons. Our ballot item asks for prioritized removal of these prohibited items as identified in Boulder Revised Code 8-3-21 that are within 500 feet of schools and 50 feet of multi-use pathways. In short, the city uses a points-based system to determine what prohibited items will be removed and when. Our ballot item asks that safe zones get enough points, whatever that number might be, so that the city can take immediate action in those areas. Our ballot item does not ask for any additional resources. We'd like to also recognize the most recent work of Joe Tadeucci and the SAMPS team to remove prohibited items that spent 10 days within 20 feet of the school perimeter as student athletes have returned to Boulder High. We'd also like to recognize BVSD security personnel who undertook increased patrolling last spring in the wake of the propane tank explosions near Boulder High. We look forward to greater coordination with school and city resources as this ballot item moves forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Daphne. Okay. Nick Forster.
I'm Nick Forster, speaking as a musician, as the founder of eTown, as a co-founder of Create Boulder. On behalf of the compromise ballot measure that's in front of you today, first I would like to disabuse you of the notion that it's arts versus safety, because I think that's inaccurate and unrealistic. And so let's agree that it's not an honest choice. We can actually, as the Finance Committee just shared, we can fund arts to an extent that will be transformative and supportive without compromising police, fire, safety, homelessness, and other initiatives, number one. Number two, I think it's really critical to recognize that arts is an investment. It's not an expenditure that goes down the drain. These are dollars that enliven, enrich, and engage our community in such a way that it generates revenue, typically $1.3 to $2 per dollar invested, so there's lots of research that supports that. Number 3, arts is a great pathway for a lot of DEIA initiatives that we share with the city. Number 4, I want to remind you all that we very quickly got 4,000 signatures on behalf of this initiative. There is a big appetite in the community for more funding to support the creative economy here in Boulder. And I think that we're coming to you now with this compromise measure because we know there's a new cultural plan coming. We know there's an opportunity for us to collaborate. We know there's an opportunity for us to be partners in ensuring a more creative, a more engaged, a more enthusiastic, and a more economically vibrant downtown for Boulder. So we could be adversarial. I think the odds are, who knows where they are about which one of our isolated measures would prevail. But we're coming to you tonight with the idea of partnership. We want to be partners. We want to work together to try to create a vision for a future that engages all of us on behalf of creativity and a more diverse economy that will make Boulder lively and interesting. I'm confident that if we can reach that compromise, we can work together to pass this measure on behalf of both the arts community and the 50% that will remain with the city. I'm hopeful that we can expand this beyond what's stated. In other words, I hope this doesn't represent the maximum potential funding for the arts, that it represents an opportunity for us to build from there. And I thank you for your time. And happy birthday, Tara.
Thanks, Nick. We got a question for you.
Hey, Nick, thanks for doing this. Matt had an interesting suggestion. I wanted to bounce off you to see what I know you don't speak on behalf of the whole group, and not to put you on the spot, but I want to see what your opinion is.
It's about the game of chicken.
It's the game of chicken. Yeah. Exactly right. Exactly. I thought Matt had a really good idea that maybe if it was the will of council, that we might pass the compromise proposal and the compromise proposal only, which puts us a little bit at risk on the calendar for the city-only one.
Oh, apparently not, actually. You'll have
well, not at risk, but it just squeezes the calendar a little bit. If we were to do that tonight, and then presumably pass on third reading, and not even put the other two on the agenda for that night, do you think your group would be inclined to withdraw your petition before August 17?
Yeah, I think we would want to look at the compromise language that we suggested and make sure that the new language was adopted, because there's some questions and some concerns we have about the language that came from the city attorney's office as opposed to what we'd requested. But assuming that in the next week or so, I mean, we've got a couple of weeks before the 17th, and assuming that there's an opportunity to hash out some of the differences in the language, I don't see any reason why we couldn't withdraw our petition sooner. Again, it's an act of good faith. And our intention, to all of you, I'm sincerely saying, we're interested in partnership. We're interested in working together with you guys.
I was a little bit concerned about what you just said, Nick, about language, because I thought the language had been worked out. And maybe you might be a draft behind, but maybe, Aaron, can you speak to that?
Yes, we received a subsequent request yesterday afternoon for additional changes to the language. And while it's good language, it's very late in the process. So, and unnecessary. It doesn't legally add or detract anything. Really would be a wording change in our opinion. So if we made more changes, that would require more readings. And we are getting very close to the end.
I think the challenge for us from a timing perspective is simply that we got the language yesterday. Mm-hmm. So it's not unreasonable for us to react to the language that we received yesterday afternoon. So that's all I'm saying is in the next couple weeks, it seems like we ought to be able to hash it out. And I don't see any problem with, between now and the 17th of August, being able to agree on compromise language and withdraw our ballot initiative.
Well, the problem, Nick, is that if there's a further change, so we're going to try to adopt something tonight.
Sure, I understand.
And it has to go to a third reading. If you make a further change, then it has to go to a fourth reading. And so we're really kind of running. We have a time problem here. So we kind of have to make a go/no-go decision tonight.
Well, then I'm probably not empowered to speak on behalf of that.
Okay, that's fine.
Jeannie, did you have a follow-up question?
Thank you. I just have a quick question. When we had the meeting about this very issue,
One of my questions, or at least a comment that I made, that Aaron, Matt, and Bob would go back to the arts community. And my understanding, I think Bob responded to that and said, no, it's just two people. And I wanted to hear from you. My understanding is that you are one of the representatives who's working on the ballot measure, the petitioners. So my question to you, now that it's a 50-50 initiative that we are looking at, what outreach have you done to ensure that the people who originally signed for the measure as it was, now that we're going to 50-50, did you reach out to them, and what feedback did you get?
Yeah, that's a great question, Junie. Thank you so much for that. You're absolutely right that the initial petition was for 100% of the tax going to arts and culture. There was a lot of passion in the arts and culture community, as you might imagine, and there was a lot of enthusiasm for this measure when we were gathering signatures. I would say that we are coming to you now with a compromise that has consensus, and there's some caution and there's some concern. As Mark's question came in regarding the Finance Committee and what level of existing funding would be maintained and which side of the budget would that, there's a lot of, it's a leap of faith for us. It's a leap of faith for us in the arts community because there's no way that this council can bind future councils on behalf of existing spending. And so all I can tell you is that we have consensus among arts leaders in the community to go forward with a 50-50 compromise. I will also say that there's a broad hope that the existing levels of funding would be maintained, but again, there's no guarantees, and we're willing to take that risk. But we've done a lot of outreach to the community, and we've gotten general support for the 50-50 compromise.
Thank you.
Lauren?
Thank you. I appreciated you speaking to, an interest in collaborating between the arts organizations and council. And I like that aspect of the 50-50 split, but I also am struggling with the idea of trusting voters. And so one of the things that, this is going to be a controversial idea, but how would you feel, or do you have any sense of how the group that you represent would feel about placing all three measures on the ballot?
Oh, it's a great question, Lauren. And my feeling is, as I said, we got 4,000 votes really quickly during a monsoon. We have dozens of arts organizations and all of their staff, volunteers, donors, and patrons aligned behind this effort. If it came down to it, I have a lot of confidence that we would prevail at 100%. And we have, as I mentioned, a lot of passion. We have plenty of time to organize, and we've demonstrated that we're really good at organizing. So I'm not saying that as a threat. I'm simply answering your question, that if all three were to go on the ballot, I would be a busy boy between now and November 7th, and I would feel pretty good about our chances. And may I also clarify, I don't represent the entirety of this community and this issue. I'm here as an arts person, as an arts leader, and someone who's passionate about this and who's been in Boulder making art for 4 decades or more, and I feel very strongly about this, but I don't want to overstate my role here tonight.
Okay, well, Nick, thanks for
Thank
the
you.
question. Nicole's got one too.
Sorry, I just had one more. I really am curious, why not just go for the 100%? Right? I mean, I see the arts community wanting more funding. You all have for as long as I've been paying attention to all the Police Before Council. Why not? I mean, this because it, sort of to follow up on Lauren's point.
Yeah.
Don't we trust the voters to know what?
Yeah. That's a great question, Nicole, and I think that I think there's a lot of passion in the community to do that. I think we're actually hearing from a lot of people that we should just go for the 100%. And I think given the fact that the cultural plan is looming, and that there's an opportunity for us to craft a vision that's a little bit larger, that actually describes how arts and culture can interact with existing city priorities and needs that include housing, that include healthcare, that include diversity and equity, inclusivity. There's a lot of city initiatives that have an arts component that is potentially pretty dynamic. And so the idea that we would be adversaries going for these dollars, to my mind at least, sets the wrong tone. I think that we have an opportunity to collaborate on behalf of including arts and culture in many city priorities. And I share, I mean, I'll be really honest with you. I'm a 100% guy. Like, I actually feel like we could go and beat the bushes and win. So I'm taking a leap of faith here as well, especially given Mark's comments, especially given, you know, the idea that this might be a small incremental shift from where we are currently. We've all worked really hard and not particularly enthusiastically about an incremental shift. We're really talking about a dynamic shift. So that's my answer. I think it's a great question, and I respect all of you, and I like the process of collaborating. So that's all.
Thanks, Nick. Appreciate it.
Thanks, you guys. Yeah, sorry if I went on too long.
Yeah, it's all good. Let's move to the rest of the public hearing. Or unless, Rachel, did you have? Okay. Well, we got virtual speakers who want to hear from. Our first three are Lynn Siegel, Mary Horrocks, and Carolyn Kurt.
I was going to say I totally agree with Nick, but I don't. Nick and I disagree here. 100%. I'm a Nader gal. I'm not voting for Biden again. No way, my brother Brad. No way. So this is the deal. The arts have been underfunded for decades and decades, and we owe them. And this is the time to speak out about it. And like Nick said, I do agree with him. The biggest bang for the buck is arts and DEI. And this is the thing, I'm not voting. If this is a 50-50, I'm not voting for it, okay? Not gonna vote 50-50. It's gotta be 100 or nothing for me. So compromise doesn't make it. And you know what? You lost my vote last year with the library district. You're taking $300 a year from me. I haven't got the money, and my property tax just went from $6,000 to $9,000 a year, and inflation and COVID and, you know, and war in Ukraine, all this stuff. I paid at the office. I already did it. And I'm really insulted by the fact that we had to sell off our library. That was not okay. And I come to you every week, and every time I testify, and I say, let the developers pay. Let the developers pay. Let the developers pay. Let the developers pay. They can handle it. They can handle it. They really can handle it. And I don't see any change. You're giving away parking restrictions. You're raising height limits. You pass all of this stuff. And it drives up inequity and causes more DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, because of the inequity in the wealth of this community. And it's got to be stopped. And then I'm getting my catalytic converter stolen because the crime's way up. $3,700 for an elder. I'm 70 now. And this is just not okay. And I think the city seems to spend a lot of money on studying stuff that's like obvious, way obvious. And that's my tax dollars, and it's not okay. And the arts are underfunded for a long time, and we owe back pay big time. So sorry folks, but 50-50 don't make it for me. No way. Thanks for what you did, Nick.
Thanks, Lynn. I have Mary Horrocks, Carolyn Kurt, and Fran Zankowski.
Hello, I'm Mary Horrocks. Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I've never done this remotely before. I'm an artist, having lived in Boulder since 1981, and since 2019, I've served as executive director for Open Studios. Prior to that, at the Dairy Arts Center for 7 years as curator of visual art and education. Council members, we appreciate your hard work and your financial support, the work of the arts commissioners and the arts and culture staff so very much. I request that council support the single ballot initiative to extend the 0.15% sales tax extension for 20 years, with 50% of the funds collected dedicated to arts, culture, and heritage. In other words, the compromise measure. I might add that I and my organization support Nick's comments that we can collaborate with other programs of the city to improve the quality of life here. Now, although Boulder ranks third among similar cities in the proportion of artists to the general population, an estimated 4,500 working artists, or 3.5% of the city's population, according to the National Endowment for the Arts, funding for the arts in Boulder still lags behind arts funding in comparable cities. It is well known that arts events generate revenue for the city. Not only are tickets sold and artworks purchased, people who come here to attend arts events spend money dining out, shopping in retail businesses, and more. To provide a national statistic from 2021, production of arts and cultural goods and services in the U.S. added 4.3% directly to the nation's GOP, for a total approaching $1 trillion. That amount remains greater than the value added by industries such as construction, transportation and warehousing, mining, and agriculture. The support for the current ballot initiative would provide approximately $3.75 million for city support for the arts and culture ecosystem, support for nonprofit artists and venues that would flow through the Office of Arts and Culture. And importantly, because the revenue stream is from sales taxes, it will closely track inflation over its 20-year cycle. And $3.75 million for the city's general fund to be spent as the city wishes, importantly, sufficient to provide the public safety and human services initiatives that council considers a high priority, and I myself do as well. Open Studios currently has 220 juried professional artist members, all of whom make a portion or the entirety of their income from their art practice. Our board, these members, our 8,000 patrons, and I plan to wholeheartedly help support passage. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Mary. Carolyn Kurt, Fran Zankowski, and Michael Nicely.
Thank you so much. My name is Caroline Kurt, and I do want to clarify for the record that I'm the chair of the Boulder Arts Commission, but I'm not here in that capacity. I'm here in my role as a resident of Boulder and an arts attorney in this community. So first of all, thank you to the council for all the difficult work that you do to balance the interests in the community. It is not easy. I am here in support of the compromise measure, Ordinance 8591. According to the National Endowment for the Arts, Boulder has the third highest concentration of professional artists per capita in the country. And Boulder is also consistently listed as one of the top 10 arts vibrant, medium-sized cities in the US, according to SMU Data Arts. Notably, that index measures 3 factors: the number of art providers in the community, the demand for arts measured by audience-based revenues, and federal and state government funding for the arts. In 2021, Boulder ranked 7th out of all medium-sized cities in the country for the number of art providers, 10th in the country for demand, and only 168th for state and federal funding. Government funding is lagging behind for a city with our population and demand for the arts. Funding can and should be supplemented by the municipal budget at a greater level. But our funding in Boulder still lags behind at the city level. The largest budget that the Arts and Culture program has received was in 2023. That was the $1.8 million budget, about half of which was provided through the federal ARPA funds. And still that $1.8 million budget is only 0.5% of the general operating budget for the city. And it compares to Boulder Parks and Rec and Open Space combined budget of $68 million. Not a lot. Every year, the Arts Commission may make heartbreaking decisions to deny grant funding to programs and projects that are compelling, would provide value, and otherwise receive feedback warranting of funding. But the arts budget, particularly for general operating, only goes so far. I would also like to say, in addition, that arts positively impact local government budgets. According to the Arts and Economic Prosperity 5 study, on a national basis, governments at the state and local level receive a 5-to-1 return on investment when they spend on the arts. Secondly, according to the Americans for the Arts, there are at least 29 different topics that arts affect within cities. These range from workforce development, tourism and economic development, to aging, housing, livability, public welfare, and more. I would invite you to visit the Arts for Americans website to explore those impacts. So please support adding the proposed compromise initiative on the ballot. It would provide substantial support to art programming without impact on the citizens, and would reflect a partnership and guaranteed funding for both the arts and the city. Thank you.
Thank you, Caroline. Now we have Fran Zankowski and Michael Nicely.
Good evening, Council, and thank you for this opportunity to address you. I am Fran Zankowski. Like Nick, I'm a board member of Create Boulder and also the publisher of the Boulder Weekly. And just as a side note, my favorite insect is the lowly earthworm. I am here tonight on behalf of the Petition Committee for the Arts, Culture, and Heritage Tax Ballot Measure, seeking your support for our proposed compromise measure. Passing this compromise will avoid confusion and divisiveness in the November election. More important, it will ensure that one, arts and cultural program in Boulder meets the needs and aspirations of our community, while also being diverse, equitable, inclusive, and accessible to all. These values are essential for a thriving and cohesive society. Two, arts education becomes accessible to all our children, supporting their cognitive, emotional, and social development. This is especially vital as schools face mounting pressure to divert resources away from arts education. Three, Boulder can effectively compete with other Colorado communities that are prioritizing the arts, making significant investments to strengthen their local economies and their communities. Investing in the arts has an exponential impact on economic activity, generating jobs, increasing local spending, and contributing to the city's tax base. The arts are fundamental to our collective and individual humanity. They foster vital social connections, engender a sense of belonging, and empower communities to work together in addressing challenges. The compromise measure presents a historic opportunity to enrich Boulder's cultural landscape and transform Boulder into a more vibrant, resilient, and welcoming community for future generations. We urge you to vote yes for the compromise initiative. And again, thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you, Fran. Our final speaker is Michael Nicely.
Michael, you should be able to unmute now.
All right. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. My name is Michael Nicely. I am a teacher for the past 45 years now, and for the past 7 years here in the Boulder area. And I care deeply for all of my students and my colleagues' well-being, especially as we seek to grow and strive and survive and thrive in this 21st century world. As an artist, writer, and photographer working within the Boulder arts community, I implore the council and citizens to vote to extend the sales tax of 0.15%, which will currently expire in 2024, to be divided among public safety, public services, and yes, the Boulder arts community. You certainly appreciate and value the many roles that the arts serve to enhance the quality of life for everyone in Boulder proper and outlying areas whose lives are tied to this essential center of civilization here on Colorado's Front Range. Revenues generated from extending this compromise ordinance optioned sales tax can continue to provide needed financial support to include the arts, its organizations, and its individual artists who depend on the spectrum of community members contributing to the greater cause of enriching our increasingly vibrant and vital community. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Michael. All right, I'm going to close the public hearing and come to council for discussion. And so what I'm going to suggest, I think we have our crux issue is what we're doing with the 0.15 tax measure. It's the things with the potentially most disagreement about. So I'd like for us to address that if we could. And what I might ask is whether council supports this 8591 50-50 compromise measure. And so kind of look to council. I mean, I could go straight to a straw poll, or if people wanted to offer some introductory remarks, that's fine too. I saw Rachel and then I got Nicole.
Okay, I will, if this is what we're doing, I will speak in support of the 8591 compromise. I appreciate the community members who noted that we usually get a 2-to-1 return on investment in dollars dedicated to arts, maybe up to 5.1, someone said. So that was impressive. And then I just wanted to, if you will humor me, community, read a couple lines from a letter that we received from the NAACP asking whether they support, and other community members received some outreach, would support the 50-50 split. So this is just a few lines from there. The Boulder's Office of Arts and Culture has done more to support racial equity than any other city department to date. The arts community has shown that the arts bring in revenue, mostly by attracting tourists and patrons from outside and within Boulder who spend money on adjacent restaurants and retail sales. When a city embraces cultural awareness and art, the result is revenue, vibrancy, and prestige. The NAACP Boulder County could easily support 100% of the tax going to the arts, although this is in support of 50-50 split. Those who are unclear about the intrinsic value of artists in society are advised to study history more thoroughly. The arts speak a universal language reaching across ethnic, religious, and economic divisions. The arts allow for nonviolent cultural shifts. The 4,000 signatures bringing this ballot measure forward represent voters who understand the value of unapologetically supporting the arts in Boulder, recognizing the dramatic and positive difference such support could and would bring. I don't think I can say it better than that, so I would just say that I am in support, and I really appreciate the collaborative spirit. I, for one, would not want to fight with arts, so thank you.
Nicole, Matt?
Thank you. So I think I'm going to have a different opinion here. I would rather put the 2 original or all 3 measures on the ballot. If we move forward with only the compromise, we're going to be going against our long-term financial goals to move away from dedicated funding. We'll be going against the thousands of voters who wanted to dedicate this whole tax to arts and culture. And we'll be going against the evidence in our polling that said if we gave them the opportunity to spend more money, most voters would like us to put money into other programs. The feedback that we received from a handful of equity-focused arts and cultural organizations, first of all, thank you to everybody who did take time to give us feedback on such short notice. But what we got back was mixed. Some were in favor of the compromise, some were in favor of renewing the tax only for general fund purposes, some were in favor of the measure giving all the funding to the arts. But we didn't talk to other communities that are in need of extra support, the LGBTQ plus community, groups like EPA who are seeing huge increases in need, or community connectors, other things that are funded by general funds. Of course, the arts transcends all of these groups, but it doesn't sit well with me that council would move forward without hearing from other groups that are in need of extra support. We also didn't get feedback from our Human Relations Commission, which would have been ideally positioned to advise us. We didn't get feedback from the Arts Commission, which will be enormously impacted if their grant budget and need to review applications doubles or triples. And we didn't get feedback from our connectors, some of whom lead arts and cultural organizations, and all of whom have already been engaging their communities and thinking about how we allocate funds in our budget. So with this compromise measure, we're talking about $55 million or more over the next 20 years. That's a lot of money to be moving pretty quickly. And if we're moving so quickly with such a large amount of money that we can't engage the boards and commissions and other groups who can expand our thinking about the impact of a decision like this, I would prefer to not change course at this stage. Let's let the voters take the wheel and put the original city measure and the arts petition on the ballot. I don't see having both measures as being divisive. I actually see it as an opportunity to get buy-in. Our residents are smart and thoughtful. 35,000 voters will do a far better job of sussing out this issue and all the unintended consequences of the two options than the 9 of us will. I really don't want to take this vote and decision from our community. I have faith that whatever they decide will be well-reasoned and will set us on the right path for the next 20 years.
Thanks, Nicole. Matt?
I first want to maybe address a little something that my colleague Nicole just said with regards to input from HRC and others. None of the ballot measures addressing the 0.15 sought that input or got that input. Does that mean we foreclose going anywhere on 0.15? Absolutely not. And so I think it's important for us to maybe not use what happens towards the end of ballot measure process and an opportunity to unify and collaborate as a means to halt all that work. I think it's important for us to recognize that we have a cultural master plan that's about to give us an immense opportunity to set a roadmap for how we invest and how we engage in every aspect of our community in order to make the arts not just great, but to make them the proper return on the investment we're about to make in the arts. And I think that's critical for us to do. I first want to just thank Arts for Boulder, the ballot committee, and all the people that signed this petition, because what it did is it really brought us all to the table to talk about how we can transform this community and give them the proper tools to be successful now and into the future. And I appreciate what Rachel brought up with regards to the letter we got from NAACP and what that return of investment is. This is the floor, not the ceiling, and I think it's important for us to recognize that. We have an opportunity to transform the arts, and if there's more to come, we have perhaps we have BMOCA moving north, hopefully. We're talking about a performing arts complex. We're talking about infrastructure for places for performing other performers and other artists to have space to minimize the impacts of high rent in our community. I think all of those things are things and reasons why we make that investment. It's important for us to recognize, as Nick said, that this is an investment, not an expense. So for all of those reasons, and for the sake of being collaborative, I think it's important for us to move forward with this compromise of 50-50. It's the best thing we can do, where we all win, but we all lose a little too when we compromise. The city doesn't get to have all of its general fund, and nor does the arts take the risk on their end. So this is exactly what community does. When there's two things going in a different direction, we find a middle ground, we find a way where everybody gets a little something out of it. So I think this is a great alternative, given that we are getting pulled in two different directions. So I enthusiastically will support this compromise, this 50-50, and I'm looking forward to how it transforms our community going forward.
Well, I'll just pick up where Matt left off. I think this is a wonderful compromise, too. I really appreciate the Arts for Boulder bringing this to us and their willingness to move to 50-50, even though they have a legal right to go for the 100% ballot measure. They may win that, they may not if it goes forward. I think there's a little confusion here on the dais, and so I want to try to clarify it, or at least to state my understanding of it, and maybe I'm wrong. We're not allocating any money tonight. We're not doing a budget tonight. We're not saying that 20 times 3.7 million is going to the arts. We're not saying anything tonight. The only decision we're making tonight is what to put on the ballot. The voters will decide how much of this money should go to the arts, or if any. It's the voters' decision. The only decision we're making is what do we put on the ballot. And the Arts in Boulder group has the legal right tonight to insist that we put their 100% ballot measure on the ballot. And they could say that tonight, and we would have to do that. We have no choice. But they've come to us now and said, you know what, we got the signatures at 100%, but we're willing to actually accept only 50%. Council, what say you? Do you want to have 0% or do you want to have 50%? That's the only decision we're making here. We're not making a decision about what to give to the arts. That's going to be a voter's decision. And so all we're being asked to is what to tee up for the voters. And the folks who own the legal right to put this on the ballot have said, you know what, for all the wonderful reasons that Fran and Nick and others have said about compromise and collaboration and cooperation, which I very much appreciate. They've said, you know, even though we have a legal right to go to 100%, we will take 50% and we'll go hand in hand to the voters with that. To me, that's a no-brainer decision. I mean, it doesn't get any better than that, where somebody voluntarily gives up a right and says, we'll take less. Why would we, as a council, not accept that generous offer and retain some more of the money for some of the other things that our general fund needs? So I'm fully supportive of the compromise, and I very, very much appreciate the members of the community who brought this to us.
Thanks. Mark?
Well, I'm going to take a different point of view and agree with my colleague Nicole on this. You know, we have been increasing arts funding. We have not discussed not only the extent to which we've been increasing it, but the velocity at which we have been increasing it. And now we are looking to double it again. And as some of my colleagues have said, who may differ from me on this issue, they view this as a floor, not a ceiling, so we may be looking at tripling or quadrupling it. We do have other needs, and we do have needs that we cannot fully satisfy. EFA came before us tonight and said, we are seeing vast increases in need for our services. Now, we're not providing 50% of this for them, and they could make an equally strong case that the services that they provide are of inestimable value to this community. I know Nick is very confident in his ability to prevail on this, but I think and he may be correct, but to me, this is a decision that ought to be made by the voters of Boulder, not by this artificial compromise. I prefer to see both Nick's initiative language and our competing ballot be placed on the ballot, and let the community decide whether they want a more robust a general fund and an ability to address more things that are that we need to address, or whether they want to divert more of our funds to the arts. That's a major decision. It will have impact, and I know it will have impact. But you know what? We have a very bright community here. If that's what they want, I'm happy to have them do that. You know, we will have to figure out how to do that, but we will. And I'm not at all convinced that that's the way the vote would go. I think people do have a sense of the various needs and competing needs of the city, and I would let them make that choice. So I would not support the compromise. I would support putting on the ballot the 100% for the arts and our competing resolution, and taking it from there, and let the people who really should make the decision, the voters, make the decision. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. I got Lauren and then Tara.
Thank you. I appreciated what Matt said. This compromising is safe, and I do feel like we all win, but we all lose. I would like to give the voters the full range of options that we're considering here. We have been told time and time again that earmarking is not a good idea for our long-term financial strategy. But this is really the people's money, and it is really their decision. I know that placing trust in our voters in that way, on an item that has far-reaching long-term consequences, is scary. But it really is, you know, their funding, and so I would like to see us place that trust and allow the community to win in the way that they see as the best option forward.
Thanks. Tara?
Well, first I want to say that we on council make a lot of decisions that we don't get votes on. So that's first of all. But what I really want to say is council is full, for me, of a lot of difficult decisions and trade-offs. But tonight, I have to say, not just because it's my birthday, Nick, and because we had the cutest kids ever as the pollinators come, I was really smiling tonight because, first of all, your speech was inspiring for me, but also because I really get excited when we can do something like this, where we can work together, we can have partnerships, and I think everybody actually wins. So excited. I think for me, arts is, we do a lot of stuff that is like, how can we fix this and how can we fix that? And I do like fixing things, but for me, arts is more visionary. So it's combining fixing and visionary at the same time. To me, it's the perfect partnership. I'm excited to vote for that 50-50 partnership.
Great. I'll go ahead and call on myself. I wanted to congratulate the Arts for Boulder folks for gathering so many signatures in such a short time period. When I saw you start that work, I looked at the time clock and thought, well, it seems unlikely to be successful, but you pulled it off, which showed a very high level of enthusiasm in the community for this measure. So congrats on that. But when I saw it certified, I was excited about the additional possibilities for the arts, but also concerned because the 100% measure would have forced a reduction in spending on city services, which I didn't want to see. So then thank you to the Arts for Boulder folks for coming to us to talk about a compromise, because we have a unique opportunity here to add additional transformative arts funding without reducing other city services. And so I'm excited to move forward with this compromise, and look forward to putting it on the ballot and hopefully having it passed. It's the arts feed our souls, and hopefully this tax will nourish our community, the soul of our community, for many years to come. So thank you. A little double dip. And then
just a really slight double dip, which is, I am afraid of a lot of things for our community, like flooding and, violence against community members, things. I am not afraid, I am not coming from a position of fear on this. I'm not afraid of 0, 50, or 100% going to arts. So I just wanted to clarify for the community that that's not where I'm coming from. Thanks.
Okay. So we could, if no one else has any further comments, we could go to a motion on this one. Sure.
Before I make a motion, I just had a clarification with Aaron or Teresa with regards to if I choose to make a motion with regards to passing 8591, with regards to moving forward with only that and not the other two, be it 8588 and 8589. Do I need to say something about not moving forward with them, or by saying nothing is sort of defaulting to that?
I would say nothing and just deal with 8591, and then there may be more discussion amongst the council about what to do with those two ordinances.
Wonderful. Well, then I'll go ahead and start that. So I make a motion to pass ordinance 8591, submitting to the electors of the city of Boulder at the general municipal coordinated election to be held on Tuesday, November 7th, 2023, the question of, without raising additional taxes, extending the existing 0.15 cents city sales tax and use tax approved by the voters by ordinance 7300 beyond the current expiration date of December 31st, 2024 until December 31st, 2044, with 50% of the revenue used to fund fire, emergency response services, public safety services, homelessness solutions and services, parks, and other general fund purposes, and 50% of the revenue used to fund arts, culture, and heritage programs, as a voter-approved revenue change specifying the form of the ballot and other election procedures and setting forth related details.
Second.
Before you finish voting, I just want to check and make sure, because I missed it, whether or not you said pass and amend or just pass.
Pass and amend? Okay, I was just going to pass. All right, so I'll start again.
Thank you.
No, I'm going to say pass and amend.
I'll just say pass and amend? Pass as amended. Thank you.
I second that.
And can I ask, Aaron, do we need to clarify that this would be using the language from the hotline from 2 days ago? I mean, you read the title, but there were some other changes as well.
If you'd like to make that part of the record, it certainly wouldn't hurt.
So I just want to clarify.
I would just say, clarify that as amended with regards to the hotline that was sent a few days ago, that amended language, which I read the ballot title of, and then there was related details that followed that were modified. Does that clarify?
That's wonderful. Thank you.
Great. Second. Got a motion and a second. And unless we need further discussion, Alicia, can we go to a vote, please?
And for just the record, this vote is for the pass and the amend and a pass of 8581.
8591.
I'm sorry, 8591. My
Yes.
apologies. I'm reading all over the place. All right, we will start this vote with Councilmember Spear.
No.
Mayor Pro Tem Wallach.
No.
Councilmember Weiner.
Yes.
Yates.
Yes.
Benjamin.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you. Mayor Brockett.
Yes.
Councilmember Folkerts.
Yes.
Friend.
Yes.
And Joseph.
Yes.
8591 is hereby amended and approved as amended with a vote of 7-2.
Okay, thanks very much, Elisha. Lauren, and I've got direction to go next too.
I would like to make a motion to, let's see, I'm trying to keep track of which one I need to pass and amend. To pass and adopt ordinance 8588, submitting to the registered electors. Sorry.
Well, you can do that if you want to. I mean,
8588 is the staff proposal with
sorry.
100% to the
Thank
general
you.
fund.
Okay. To pass and amend 8589, submitting to the registered electors of the city of Boulder at the general municipal coordinated election to be held on Tuesday, November 7th, 2023, the question of, without raising additional taxes, extending the existing 0.15 cents city sales and use tax approved by the voters by ordinance 7300 beyond the current expiration date of December 31st, 2024 until December 31st, 2044, and earmark revenue from this tax extension to fund arts, culture, and heritage as a voter-approved revenue change, specifying the form of the ballot and other election procedures and setting forth related details.
you got a motion? Do we have a second?
I think she's still going.
Are you still going?
Yes, and I would also like to, which one's that?
So I think we need to consider one motion at a time.
Is it one at a time?
Yeah, it's one at a time. So what I might say, Lauren, is we'll look
Okay.
for a second, and then we'll ask you to speak to your motion. You can talk about your other, where you're going.
Yes.
Second.
Okay, we got a motion and a second. So Lauren, would you like to speak to your motion?
I've already covered this a little bit, but I think that giving voters, my preference is always going to be to try and give voters choice. So in this circumstance, I would like to see us put all three of these options on the ballot for voters to choose between.
Got it? Do you have a question, Matt?
Lauren, I got a question for you. What's that?
I'm going to retract my always.
Oh, okay. Always. I like that. Yeah. Absolute statements are tough, right? So my question for you is with regards to your desire to see all three on the ballot. And in particular, you notice you just voted yes on 8591. And so I'm wondering, does your support of 8591, is that contingent on seeing the other two on the ballot? Or perhaps, and maybe you can't answer this now, but I'm just sort of curious about if your support for 8591 is really contingent on perhaps the other two also being on the ballot. And so I'm just sort of wondering how this plays out, because next week, as planned, two might fall off, but you want all three. And so I just didn't know if it has to be, if you're interested in really a package, or you still are okay if one or only two or anything end up actually on the ballot in terms of how you would support going forward. And maybe you don't want to answer that now, and that's fine, but I was just curious about how that would impact your support going forward.
I would really like to see all three. I will wait and see and decide as those things become apparent in the future.
Junie, you got a question?
Thank you. I think this is a process question. It is for you, Aaron, or maybe for the petitioners, Nick. So
we've decided that we're going 50-50 with the understanding that the petitioners or the representatives will remove their measure. If we were to add the other two, we would have to get their buy-in, wouldn't we? Or we would be able to just do it?
You can't remove it for them. So you could end up with 3 ballot initiatives, 100, 100, 50-50. But only they can take off their petition.
But that's exactly what I'm asking, is that if we were to right now to go with this proposal, have they decided that they will continue on with the 100%? Because part of it is that we've done this compromise and they would withdraw that 100%. Does that make sense?
I believe what I've heard from them is that they will wait to withdraw their petition until after the 17th, though I may have understood that. So it could put council in the position of having to repeal if they said they would and they didn't. The August 24th study session could be converted to a special meeting, and the compromise 50-50 could be repealed.
So my question
Council
is...
member?
Yes, go ahead.
I want to see if I understand your question. Is your question, if we were to move forward with all 3 tonight, does the petitioner have to assent?
Yes, would they? Yes.
They do not.
Okay.
They do not. The council is the body with the authority to act tonight. The petitioners have acted by collecting their signatures and submitting a petition that has been certified by our clerk. And so they've taken that action. In addition, they have conferred with the city for the language of the ballot title, and the city has proposed ballot title language. And so everything that the petitioner has to do has been accomplished. Whether they withdraw a petition or not is
It's just up to them.
is simply, exactly, thank you, it's within their discretion. This body cannot force that.
Yeah, okay. Does that answer your question, Jane? Good. And I have something to add here, but I'll go to Rachel and Bob.
Just to follow up on Junie's question, I had asked about this at the last time we discussed it too. Like, what would the petitioners think about having 3 options? So I don't know if yours is like a formally, what can we do, or don't we want to know what they think of it because we just tried to compromise? So I had asked that the people who were kind of chatting with them, look into that, and I can't speak for 4,000 people or even, those who are the petitioners themselves, but I got 0 indication that they were interested in the 3-part option. Yeah. So that's what I heard back, if that's at all helpful.
Yeah, I got that as well. Bob? No, I'm calling myself.
I'm kind of inclined to vote. Just let me ask you a question and I'll make a statement. I think if we pass 8589 today in the motion that Lauren's made, that's not the final reading. We still would have to have one more reading on 8589. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay.
3rd reading.
If the petitioners had come up here and said 2 things, we are happy with the language of 8591, and if they had said, and if you guys pass it on 2nd reading and promise to pass it on 3rd reading, we'll withdraw our petition between now and then. If they had said those 2 things, I wouldn't be interested in 8589. But we have 2 areas of uncertainty. Apparently, we are still quibbling over the language. And we don't have, I'm not hearing the petitioner saying that they'll withdraw their petition before the 17th of August. So in light of those 2 things, I'm inclined to vote to move forward in 8589. It's not the final reading, but that does preserve us some optionality as far as time. Because what I'm afraid of is we'll get to the 17th of August. We will only have moved forward 8591. And we'll have some sort of mess with the language because we've already had some messy discussions, it sounds like, with the language. And we will not have had a withdrawal of the petition. And then we'll be not out of options, but coming close to out of options, because we won't have even past 2nd reading. We still have to do a 3rd reading on 8589. So I'm inclined to, just for safety net's sake, pass 8589 tonight. That gives us optionality. I'm not supportive of 8589, but I just think that because of the large uncertainty here as we sit here, just weeks away from our ballot measure deadline, I think we need to pass it. I appreciate your suggestion, Matt. I thought it was a great one, but then we learned some things that maybe cause that not to work. So I'm going to vote in favor of 8589, at least tonight.
So I'll call on myself and agree with what Bob has just said, that, I think that for safety's sake, that moving 8589 forward while we continue the discussions on the details of the language is a safe thing to do. And then hopefully we can move forward cleanly with 8591 with final language and have that be the only thing at the August 17th meeting. But I'll vote for Lauren's measure on 8589. But I will say that, Lauren, if you do continue to then also move 8588, which is the 100% general fund, that I will not support that motion. I do not want to move all three forward. I want to make sure that we're shooting towards 8591. That's the 50-50 compromise. So I'll just put that out there right now. All right, any other comments before we go to a vote on the motion? Nicole?
I just, since I seconded, just wanted to add, I think, Bob, you mentioned we don't want to sort of predetermine outcomes here, but it feels like that's kind of what we're doing, that we wouldn't be trying to strike a compromise if, we didn't think that the arts measure at 100% was potentially going to pass. But there are a lot of assumptions here, and at the end of the day, we don't know what the voters are going to do. So I really would still like to see all three move forward, and I will vote for this. Also wanting to vote for the 8588 when that comes to it.
Great. So we've got a motion and a second. I see no further hands raised. Elisha, if we could go to vote on the motion, please.
I just wanted to clarify for the record as well, do we need to say as amended by the hotline as well for 8591?
Yeah, but maybe just clarify using the language from the hotline from 2 days ago.
Yes, pass and amend using the language from the hotline 2 days ago.
All right, thank you. We'll start this vote with Mayor Pro Tem Wallach.
Mark?
Aye.
Councilmember Weiner.
Yes.
Yates.
Yes.
Benjamin.
Yes.
Mayor Brockett.
Yes.
Councilmember Folkerts.
Yes.
Friend.
In keeping with my colleague Bob Yates' logic, yes.
Joseph.
Yes. Yes.
And Spear.
Yes.
Ordinance 8589 as amended is hereby approved with a vote of 9-0.
So Lauren, are you still going?
And my understanding is that we would not need to take action on 8588 at this time.
8588 has not been amended. So if you passed it tonight, that would be final action, and we don't recommend that.
Thank you.
It will just move forward for August 17th. So it's an option on the table.
Sounds great.
So then, in other words, the remaining items, the ordinances 8586, 8587, and 8588, we will move forward. We will not vote on them tonight, but ask that they be brought back for the 17th for consideration.
Absolutely correct.
Okay. Very good. So that then covers all 5 of our potential ordinances that we were discussing. So good work, everyone, talking that through. And so I just want to comment on where that leaves us, which is that I think we have given some pretty clear council direction, but we have not taken final votes on which ordinances to actually adopt. So I think on the 17th, this will be a CAC decision, but we may put these on consent, but then have, or the continued hearing is, maybe that's what we already have that as a placeholder. Should we continue the hearing?
It's legislative, so it's not a quasi-judicial hearing that would have to be continued.
Mm-hmm.
So you could schedule it as CAC under the public hearing slot that's been set aside, or it could be on consent.
Right, so we'll leave that up to CAC to make that decision, but just I think everyone can anticipate that we'll have to talk about this at least a little bit on the 17th to make the final decisions and the final votes. Any other thoughts on this matter before we close it out? All right, thanks for productive and civil discussion, and thanks again to the petitioners for their collaboration. And it's always fun to work through some actual motions. So, all right, if we can then go to our matter from the city manager, please.
Yes, sir. Our matters from the city manager are item number 6 on tonight's agenda. 6A is the 311 Mapleton land dedication update.
Thank you so much, council members. And this item has been before council. We've talked about it a few times, and we have our Director of Housing and Human Services here to provide a quick update.
Good evening again, council. I'm your closer tonight. If you could put up the presentation. So again, we're discussing a project which came in front of council several years ago. It's currently under construction at 311 Mapleton. It's some of the first aspects or units of this development are going to be receiving their certificate of occupancy soon. And during the time where it went through entitlements, and you can go to the next slide, during the time it went through entitlements, the developer put forward a proposal to meet their inclusionary housing. It was very different than what would be required under inclusionary housing. And to recall, at that time, our inclusionary housing requirement was 20%. It's currently 25%. So it's a development of 91 independent living units. And so what they had committed to at the time was 8 units on site, and then to develop the Fruhoff site, which is on 33rd Street, as an affordable housing development, also for seniors. And that was documented through an agreement that was presented to council, if I recall, a couple of days before that final vote. And then we didn't hear about it for quite some time. They eventually started development at 311 Mapleton, and when they pulled their building permits, they paid cash in lieu. And what had happened prior to them starting at 311 Mapleton is the agreement had actually expired. It was based on them receiving financing for Fruhoffs, and so the agreement that was made was actually null and void at that point. So it reverted back to the inclusionary housing requirements of 20%. So it was a difficult challenge for council as well as for the community. And so as staff, when we saw that happening, we began negotiating with the developer to see if we could come to an agreement which was closer to their original commitment. And I'm not speaking for the developer tonight, but the reasons they've given for that change in direction was issues related to financing and cost of construction. So if you could go to the next slide, I'll talk about the agreement that we've come to. So they're gonna, it's a site review, I'm sorry, it's a voluntary agreement that's been made. And so the Fruhoff site, which they are going to develop, they will be donating to the city. The city in turn will be turning that over to Boulder Housing Partners to eventually develop that site. And in lieu of the 8 units that they had committed to provide on site, they will be paying a total of $1.7 million in cash in lieu. The total value of those 2 aspects of the donation of Fruhoffs and the $1.7 million cash in lieu is about $8 million. If they had reverted to what they were required under inclusionary housing, it would have been about $3.8 million. So it says here on the slides, the closing is scheduled for the week of August 17th. we're actually targeting to close this next Monday. And one of the questions that had been asked by council, I think Mark Wallach had asked the question, how do we hold them to this current agreement? So this agreement is holding them accountable by not giving them certificates of occupancy on, I believe it's 4 specific buildings. And that's the leverage we have to make sure that the agreement is completed in full. So the community has followed this project very closely. Many community members have been concerned about it. So we wanted to present this to you as council to make you aware of the outcomes, and also to give you an opportunity to ask any questions that you may have about the process and where we landed. Thank you.
So, Kurt, thanks for the presentation, and thanks so much for your team's very hard work on finding an alternative satisfaction of the original agreement. Questions for Kurt?
Thanks, Aaron. Thanks, Kurt. That was very helpful. I just want to make sure I understood some of the elements that you highlighted for us. You said that the total value, your estimate of the total value of the donation of the Fruhaus land plus the $1.7 million in cash would be about $8 million, is that right?
That's correct.
So should I assume from that 8 minus 1.7, you value the Fruhaus site at about $6.3 million?
That's correct.
And I think I heard you say, but I wanted to emphasize this, that forget about the Fruhaus property, because obviously they're not required to go forward with that. But with respect to the 311 Mapleton property, if they simply fulfill their 20% cash in lieu requirement, they would simply write us a check for $3.8 million and be good. Is that right?
That's correct.
That's their
yes.
legal requirement.
Yes.
So we're getting a little bit more than twice as much as they're legally required to pay.
That's correct.
And then finally, I think you said that the property is going to be conveyed voluntarily or given to the city free, the Fruhaus property, and then it's your intention to pretty quickly turn that Fruhaus property over to Boulder Housing Partners. Is that right?
The closing will actually go straight to
Oh,
Boulder
straight to
Housing
them.
Partners.
So you won't even be in the middle of it.
There won't be 2 closings.
Got it. Okay, that's great. That's even better. And then, do you know what Boulder Housing Partners' intention is with respect to the Fruhaus property?
So what they have told me is that they would also like to target a development that provided housing for seniors.
Okay.
As you know, they have a number of developments that they're working on right now, and they will look at that to see where that fits in their queue of projects. So they haven't committed on a time frame yet of when they would focus on that development.
But are we assured, regardless of whether it's seniors or not seniors, that's their decision, are we pretty highly confident that if we convey, or the land is conveyed to Boulder Housing Partners, that at some point in time, that will be 100% affordable units?
It will, because of covenants on the property.
Great,
Yes.
great. And this is probably a question for Brad, if you happen to know the answer. I know that many, many years ago, we did a concept review on this property. Do you know if that concept review is still fresh, or would we kind of have to start over again with Boulder Housing Partners?
It has expired.
Okay.
It doesn't mean that, I don't know what the process is for digging it up again and presenting it, but that's also a possibility.
They may want to do something slightly different anyway.
That's
is that right?
correct.
Okay, that's fine. Well, this sounds like, this literally sounds to me like a good deal, too good to be true. We're getting $8 million of property and cash when all we're entitled to is $3.8 million. Am I missing anything there?
Yeah, I'm very excited about the outcome as well. It could have been much worse, and the community expected a lot. So I'm very thankful that the developers stayed with us and decided to continue to negotiate for something that was much higher than what would have been.
And we're still going to get the affordable housing at Fruhaus.
Absolutely, yes.
Well, great job. I just think this is a fantastic result. Thank you so much, Kurt.
Thank you.
If I can follow up for a second, I think that the Fruhaus site will probably be land banked for some period of time, undetermined, because there are some other things in Boulder Housing Partners queue, but it will in fact be affordable housing when they're done with it.
Thanks, Mark. Any other, Nicole?
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you, Kurt, and sorry that you had to be in this position of spending all this time on it, but really appreciate your efforts and this outcome.
Thank you, appreciate that.
We applaud you.
Yeah, this is a big round of applause for sure. And I'll just add as well, Kurt, another big thank you. Yeah, I can't tell you how many times over the years community members have asked me about this topic. You know, Bob and I were on the council when this was approved originally at 311 Mapleton, and that so many community members have come up to me and said, what happened with 311 Mapleton? Why aren't we getting the affordable housing that was originally agreed to? And for years, I didn't have a great answer. I said, well, we're hoping they'll come forward. Through hopes, we're not sure. I had this question again a week ago. A woman I was having lunch with said, what happened with 311 Mapleton? I said, we have good news, right? This is coming out in just the next few days that we've arrived at a really satisfactory outcome. So I know there's been a lot of concern in the community about this. I hope that folks feel much better about the process now that we've gotten to this much, much better outcome. So thanks again for your work on that.
Thank you.
Mark?
Yeah, I also want to give thanks to Kurt. I mean, really created chicken salad out of something a lot less tasty, and I appreciate it. This is a great outcome given the possibilities. I do think as we move forward next year into the next council, we ought to be taking a look at our processes on this so that we don't have these excitements. You know, when we think something is going to happen, we ought to have it happen. And I know there's a lot of thought going into that subject, but I would like to have us address that at the appropriate time next year, because people do have an expectation, and this was advertised in one form, and it turns out not to have happened, and there was a long delay. And if it weren't for the great efforts of Kurt and staff, we would still be looking at a delay and looking at something a lot less satisfactory than what we got. So I'm hoping we can really focus in on that next council. Thank you.
Very good. Not seeing any other hands raised. Kurt, don't go too far. But Emily, do you want to read the next one to the record, or shall I?
So we're going to move on to item 8A from under matters from the mayor and members of council. That is an update on homeless services, external evaluation, and safe outdoor camping.
Kurt, you're right here.
Yeah, so good evening again, council. So Councilmember Friend, about a week or so ago, sent a hotline requesting an update on an evaluation that we spoke about at the retreat, as well as a connection to looking at a program of safe camping for our city. And I think I did, and I think many of us went back and looked at the retreat. I came out with a lot of pointers of how I can present better next time. It's tough watching yourself talk.
True for all of us.
But so to answer your question, Rachel, so I'm going to talk about two things. One is the evaluation process. So the way we've been looking at this, so at the retreat, we committed to having an evaluation of our homeless services system. Our system is part of a wider system under Homeless Solutions for Boulder County. And so we've been collaborating with HSBC, which includes the county and Longmont, to do a more comprehensive assessment of the whole system, particularly since we're more than 5 years out of when we started that. And our intent was, as we look at that assessment and the outcomes, we're anticipating that we'll highlight gaps in our system, things that are going well, things that could go better, and that would be a good time to look at other programs. So the schedule of that, and I also noticed that I had one error in the hotline that I responded to. So the request for proposal is going out this fall in September. We'll be working with Boulder County on that. They would most likely be releasing that. It would be we anticipate awarding it in December, and the work starting in January. The the error is that we expect that work would actually be done sometime in the spring, completed in the spring of next year. And then the second thing I wanted to sort of highlight, Rachel mentioned this at CAC on Monday as well. You know, what's the progress that staff has made around this particular issue? And while it wasn't one of the 10 city council priorities, it was certainly something that we heard a lot about from council members. So some of the things that have occurred since then, we've worked with 3 different communities who have these programs. One is in Madison, Wisconsin, Louisville, Kentucky, and Portland, Oregon, and we've done reviews of those programs with those 3 cities. We've also met with, when I say we, I mean the staff who do this great work, met with the Colorado Village Collaborative, looked at their budgets, their policies, and that sort of thing. And then we also looked at I believe it was in 2016, the council put together a list of sites when it was being spoken about then, city-owned sites that could be looked at for this particular use. So we've taken that and we've looked at sort of the zoning implications of each of those sites. And lastly, we've prepared a proposed evaluation criteria of sites if we were to go down that road. So that's the update that I have for tonight on that.
Rachel, that was yours. You want to?
Sure. Thanks for that, Kurt. So just for a little bit of history, I doubt many people watched our retreat, but my memory of the retreat was that we asked at the outset for things that because at a midterm retreat you can add things to the work plan. That's like the time and place that you do it. That we asked legal, like, do we vote on this here or would we vote on it later? And I think that the advice that we got on day one was, we can't add, we can't formally vote here, so we will have to do that after the retreat. And so I think I walked away from the retreat thinking we had added safe outdoor space to the work plan and greenlit a consultant. I did send a request to CAC the weekend of the retreat and asked us to make sure we scheduled that vote, and I don't remember or know if that happened. I will say that I got COVID shortly thereafter, and my brain went kind of, soft and muddy for a month or 6 weeks. So I don't remember if we got back to that. And there was meetings with the county that was coming up, so there was a lot of stuff going on. So I kind of wanted to bring this back so we could remember, like, what is it that we did? Green light. I don't know if we need a nod of 5 to, schedule something to be voted on to add to the work plan or not tonight. But so I wanted to look at that for both of the things. I also I thought that we were saying that we wanted a consultant that would be for the city, not part of HSBC. I think that in some ways, we are not fully 100% symbiotic. We may at times have some conflict with the county, and one of those is like, we don't have a health department and the size of HHS department that they do, and I think a lot of the funding for some of the things that are really plaguing our unhoused community members, such as mental health and addiction, really are the county's purview. And so what I would be looking for in this independent consultant looking at giving us an overview of gaps in our homelessness services, as I recall, is somebody who's really beholden to us and looking at it like what's best for the city of Boulder perspective. It doesn't mean that I don't think we should be collaborating also and participating in the HSBC look, but I also don't think, like, at our retreat that we could say, show of hands for who wants to tell HSBC what to hire a consultant. I think my memory is we wanted that for ourselves. So I just wanted to clarify, bring it back, and make sure that we gave staff really crisp direction. I also could have been more concrete at the retreat in what I was asking for, and I think we were all sort of jumping between a couple different subtopics as well as gearing up for the meeting with the county. So it all got a little muddled, I think. So maybe if I have a request procedurally is, do we need to do a not a 5 to clarify what we greenlit at the retreat? Did we adequately vote on adding this to the work plan?
So look to Nuria here.
I'm happy to respond. I did have the opportunity to look at, it's always nice to go back and look at meetings where there is a lot of time, and if you know me at all, I go one by one. This person said this person said that, and want to say that it was an incredibly deep conversation. I thought it was really fruitful. There were a lot of conversations about what direction we should go to. And as Kurt brought up the conversation about the initial consultant, I think that conversation started taking root about we think it's a good idea to have a consultant, and it's maybe a good idea to have that joint, or it's a good idea to do that independently, but it was not as crisp. And the other thing, and I think you mentioned this, Councilmember Friend, is that there was, because the conversation with the county was coming up, there was a lot of, I think we need to have this conversation with the county and really be crisp with them. There was also conversation about, should we hire a national expert? Should we hire local experts? And whether or not this conversation is too premature to have yet until we have a conversation with the county. So all of that to say is that I don't think we greenlit anything at that meeting. I think that it was an expectation that maybe we would get more clarity after the meeting with the commissioners. And having said that, if this is something that council wants to bring forward, it would be a nod to add to the work plan. Staff would have to then scope that out within their current capacity constraints, and we would get back to you.
Do you want to? Yeah, go ahead.
Well, appreciate the update on that, Kurt. One thing that was evident, having looked back, was urgency on these issues, right? I think that's why we sort of refocused that mid-year retreat to focus a lot on homelessness because of that urgency. And so I'm a little, and certainly that meeting we had with the county commissioners, I think we've expressed our general place with that. But relying on that to be our vehicle for our local success, I'm not sure was where we wanted to go. So I'm a little concerned that to some extent we got to keep our cards with us to some extent on some of these things that are within our purview to do. And when there's urgency, sometimes bringing in too many collaborators retards that urgency or the efficacy of what we're trying to do. So I'm hopeful we can figure out how we maybe siphon away what that was. Maybe if they still want to pursue that, great, but we've got needs here that need to be met. And I'm not sure we have to wait on study. I mean, I think staff did a study on sanctioned camping not too long after COVID began. So we have resources. I think we have enough that we can start to make some refined decisions on if we want to. And we can always have a consultant help us refine where we go. But I think the urgency maybe dictates that we start making some moves now. But I do want to respect the work plan and staff's time. But I think time is of the essence on some of these things, and we can walk and chew gum at the same time. And I think we kind of almost have to, given the urgency of the situations.
And I appreciate that, Councilmember, and I guess maybe what we're saying is we would like your direction. We did not get a vote. We did not see consensus. We would need to see a consensus of where you would like to vote. Would you like us to consider sanctioned encampment sites? Would you like us to consider a broader array? What is it that you would like us to do so we can move forward?
Can I ask you a procedural question, if I might? Because I referenced earlier in the meeting, Nuria, that we have a study session on safe outdoor spaces on September 28th. So what is that in regards to?
I'll defer to Kurt, but I don't believe that it's just about safe outdoor spaces as much as it's an update on homelessness.
Yeah, it's actually an update on homelessness. And so we've started a number of new programs this year as well. It will be an update on all the new programs, an update on the day service center, everything that's happened, since the retreat. And so it's going to be a pretty comprehensive presentation and discussion.
Okay, so I would just have a request that we change that title right away, because actually, to Rachel's point, when I've been seeing that on our schedule coming up, I thought that was the follow-up from our discussion from the retreat. So I'm feeling let down here. Yeah.
One clarifying question. My memory of the retreat is that we asked if there was staff capacity for looking at SOS, and we were told that there is, and so that we were going to not kind of punt that over to the consultant because there was staff capacity. So I'm confused by the scoping of it now, especially if we've been doing work on it, which, and I don't think we would have focused so hard on it at the midterm retreat if we hadn't thought we were acting on it during this council. Like I am surprised that we have not driven it forward, because otherwise that could have just waited until the next council if we weren't doing anything with it.
I appreciate that, and I'll defer to Kurt. I mean, I think what I recall seeing as we reviewed the recording is that Kurt was very specific about not necessarily being able to do a whole lot and dedicate staff time until we move forward with the Day Services Center. That conversation got a little skewed as we talked about the possibility of a consultant that did get a little muddled on what was happening. And to capacity, I would defer to Kurt and his team on what they could do or whatnot, knowing that this was a discussion that we had and there was interest. I actually appreciate that they have done some work on this arena.
Yeah, so we weren't anticipating doing a full update on safe camping at the September meeting. We could introduce information on that, basically based on the work that we've done over the last few months. We have been focusing on basically the 4 new programs that have been initiated this year. One which is in process, which is probably about 2 or 3 more programs than we typically do in a year. It's been a very full year. So our intent was, after the Day Service Center was further along, to be able to focus on this. I don't think that prevents us, however, from focusing a part of the memo on this, and we certainly can make that part of the conversation.
I would certainly appreciate that. Nicole?
If that's the will of council.
Thanks. And one of the other things, I think I'd mentioned this at the retreat as well, is that we've had some opportunities where folks have given us some feedback in the past few years. So I think it was 2022, summer of 2020, where HAB and HRC kind of did a joint group to issue some recommendations around homelessness. I think there were a couple of white papers that came out of that, one of which was around these kind of micro community type ideas. And I'm just wondering if that might be, for whatever reason, I always struggle to find that document. So I'm just wondering if it could be something that's included.
We can
in
provide
that so
those
that we
as
have
attachments, yes.
That information, yeah, thank you.
Tara?
I'm piling the work right here for you. Can you also add to that different types of safe outdoor spaces, particularly like pallet, that type of thing, and also whether or not we could add wraparound services to those options for safe outdoor spaces? So in other words, not just a safe outdoor space, but also with wraparound services. That's my personal opinion, so I'm hoping that we can dump that in there as well. Yeah.
I think that the white paper that HAB and HRC did on, if I'm remembering correctly, on tiny home kinds of things, like I think the 2023 language would be micro communities, but I think that they did get to some of that. So I'm trying to think about, how can we use stuff that's already out there to provide some feedback.
In fairness, I think that white paper was a summary. I think it was about 1.5 pages long, or 2 pages long. So it doesn't provide like budget information. It provides ideas, but we can, I think most of these safe outdoor spaces do have a component of services. Sure. In fact, they all do. We can certainly include what that looks like. Yeah, so I'll stop there.
Okay, thanks for that, Kurt. I just want to say that, if I could just, on a process note here, that we didn't tee this up as a time when we were giving a nod of 5 or giving any direction or making any decisions. So I think it's really helpful to give hopefully some direction about what we get at that September 20th study session. But Rachel, if we're going to make more of a decision about changing things, we're probably going to need to queue that up for another time, because I don't think we've given notice about that. But so I just want to throw that out from a process perspective.
I think I would just reiterate then my request to CAC from February to please tee up our post-retreat discussions for a vote.
Yeah, so I would look to, like, can we, I mean, I'm looking at our next few meetings, and they're really crowded, and this is not a simple thing. But at the same time, I agree with Rachel that I feel like there's been a gap here in terms of the intentions that we had at the retreat and, the amount that we've been able to follow up from them. So I just might look to you about what next steps might be there.
I appreciate that. I appreciate there has been a gap. I really encourage everyone to look back at that retreat and the conversation that ensued. But what I'm hearing from council is that they very much would like the September 20th, I believe, meeting to include options on safe outdoor spaces. That conversation at the midterm check-in included things like tiny homes, or what was the term? Micro communities. Pallet shelters, and certainly some camping. And so there is an expectation that we include some of that at that meeting. If there is a desire to have a more definitive direction and instruction, then certainly we can take that up at CAC and figure out how to schedule it, but meetings are full.
Did you have something? Yeah.
I know our stuff's full, but that point in time count was beyond sobering. I think we all anecdotally knew where it was headed, and then to sort of have that hit like a 2x4 kind of hit you of that's where we're at on numbers. So there's a sobering urgency. So however we can wedge it in, even if it's just a little bit in the front end of on a special meeting from a study session, it'd be hard for us to get through this year, this winter, without some clarity on where we're going, because that study session still won't give us some concrete, and it'll still roll well into 2024. So I don't know. That's just sort of my frustration, but it's where we are.
So I guess I'd maybe look to council to, is this something that we would like to have for a scheduling item before the September 28th study session?
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
In response to Aaron's question, I guess I'd ask Kurt, would you be ready to do something before the September 20th study session?
No.
Yeah.
Okay, well.
I guess that answers the question. But.
However, if we're adding it to the work plan, that seems like a separate conversation than the September update, right? So, and I don't know that it has to be a long discussion, because I thought at the end of it, we had a show of hands, like, does anybody not want staff to work on this? And there were, a couple hands for that. And then is everybody comfortable looking into the consultant? So I think we had like a robust discussion, and people kind of landed where they were. And I don't know, other than formalizing that, how big of a discussion it needs to be.
Well, I would say, Rich, I know we did talk this over at the midterm retreat. We can't touch these issues without substantive discussions. Like, they're very complex and they're controversial, so I don't know that we could do something quickly.
I don't know. I feel like I sat out there and watched you all have a nod of 5, like, do we want to add an assault weapons ban? And it was like midnight and the hands went up. So there was not a robust discussion of the assault weapons ban that night. It was just like, nod of 5, are we adding that? So I do think that we can say, formalizing, we ask staff to work on safe outdoor spaces.
Nicole?
Yeah, and I think, because I've heard a couple of different things, and so are you talking about safe outdoor spaces? Or are you talking about consultant? Like, what's the?
I think both of them would need to be, better understood, because I think there's a question of, did we mean a consultant in conjunction? Because there was a difference of opinion, I think, at the retreat. Like, is that a consultant that's for the city or for working with HSBC? So I don't know how colleagues feel about that. I think that it was a little bit more, I thought that we got to, like, we would like staff to work on SOS, because I thought there was staff capacity for that coming in like April, and then April got punted to August, and I understand that, but I don't think that we formalized that, and I think that was due to, we were told at the beginning of the retreat, we can't do a not a 5 here at the retreat, and so then I just don't think we ever went back and had anything on consent saying, here's what we voted on, or here's what we should vote on. Is that right, Teresa?
Sorry. I was just going to say that certainly you can do a not a 5 tonight if that is the will of council to add this to our work plan if you choose, and then we would scope whatever that looked like and come back with timelines for you. But I think the question you're asking is whether there is will of council to add safe outdoor spaces to the work plan. And that is, I guess, what we're waiting to hear. So let's just take.
And then what has to, usually we hear from staff, like, what are we cutting before we have that vote? So that's why maybe, I mean, on that one, I think it is fair to say, let's come back to it next week or the week after to make, I don't think it has to wait till September, but like, can we understand what that work plan trade-off is?
Okay.
But I don't think that we have to have a robust discussion of it. It was what I was pushing back on to Mayor Brackett. Like, I think we had a pretty meaty discussion at the retreat of like, we didn't want to punt that to the whoever the consultant was going to be, that is still, I think, ill-defined. But I do think there was consensus. Like, I remember going down the line and you know, Tara had some specific questions and you know, about would we be looking at the pallet homes, and I think there was discussion about, I don't know.
Yeah, so then that's a more focused
Yes.
point there, and that feels like something that is potentially manageable for an upcoming meeting.
What I'm hearing then is, could staff come back earlier than September and at least provide what would the trade-offs be and the timing if this were to be put on the work plan? Is that something that we can do earlier?
So if I could just give a little feedback that hopefully will be helpful. So I also recall several conversations along the way that we were going to focus, the big project for this year really was the day service center, and we would have capacity after getting that up. I think we were clear also that it was a little bit of an undefined schedule because there's so many unknowns to that initiative. And so our plan was, I think we heard certainly majority of council members that wanted us to look at that. And that's why we have made some progress when we've been able to around that. So our focus has been to get the day center open, and then if council's still agreeable to that, to shift in that direction. The other thing that I'll add is the RFP is being sort of put together at this time over the next month, and with the consultant. And Rachel and I spoke a couple days ago about this. We can also, if we got a bit of guidance tonight, we could create an aspect of that RFP that can almost be bid, separately. So either a separate consultant could focus just on that component of work, or it could be combined, with one RFP, depending on how the consultants would sort of bid on it.
That sounds like a concrete next step.
It does.
So we would be glad, to do that.
So would people be comfortable with me asking whether there's a not of 5 for this RFP to include a scope of services to examine safe outdoor spaces as well as the current scope? No.
I mean, I suppose it could include safe outdoor spaces, but I think what Kurt and I were talking about was like a separate analysis of the homeless solutions and gaps from City of Boulder's perspective. So not just SOS, but like what, as opposed to just getting one report that is, what is HSBC going to do, have as a subcomponent of that RFP? And correct me if you're thinking of a different, we're establishing tonight miscommunication's quite easy. But that we would get a sort of a 1B portion of the contract that would be just for the City of Boulder for somebody to bid on advising us on our homelessness solutions and gaps.
And gaps,
it could
including safe outdoor spaces as a potential option.
It could include. At the retreat, I think we said we don't want to hold up SOS waiting for a consultant's report. Like I think that was part of what the majority at the retreat said, is like, yeah, that's great. They can advise us on that, but if we can do it faster, we don't want to wait on that.
So, but Rachel, in terms of what I'm asking for, then is to add to the RFP an examination of the specific gaps and needs in the Boulder homeless services and solutions. Is that what you're talking about? Yeah, City of Boulder. Does that get to what you're thinking, Kurt?
That is not what I was thinking.
Okay.
I would say that about 75 of the homeless exits in our county come through the City of Boulder.
75%?
Yes.
Yeah.
So looking at the whole system is going to give clear information on potential gaps in how we work within our city. What I was describing, what I thought we talked about, was ensuring that there was a component that also focused on providing further information on other cities and how that could work in Boulder to have safe outdoor spaces.
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
Just a process question. So this RFP that you're issuing or thinking about issuing that we may be modifying, what's the timing on that? What was the response time? Just curious.
So the RFP would be sort of adjudicated in, I think it was December. RFP will be going out in September, I believe, late September. And then so we assume they would start in January.
Okay. So what, if there was instruction from council to modify the RFP tonight, which sounds like something you're willing to do, this is, when we say we're using the word adding to the work plan, but we don't really mean adding to the work plan. We mean adding to your work plan, but we're not making a decision with respect to safe outdoor spaces. We don't even know what the options are with respect to safe outdoor spaces. We're just saying, hey, can you tweak your RFP to include this? And you'll be coming back to whoever's on council in January to say this is who we hired and this is their timeline for doing the work. Okay.
So this is maybe, so Rachel, to your earlier point, that Kurt feels confident that the City of Boulder's systems will be evaluated. But do we want to maybe, is that sufficient, do you think?
It's certainly not what I was asking for. I think that having something that's independent from the county and our own analysis would be helpful.
So I'm going to take a crack at something, which is to potentially that we could give direction that the RFP be modified such that it would include an examination of safe outdoor spaces and other micro-community options for the City of Boulder, while also as part of the larger evaluation specifically examining the unique situation of the city as part of that larger system and where we might need some unique approaches. Just called a timeout.
Yeah, I think.
Phone a friend? Is that what they're
Oh, two friends.
Same conversations.
I've been staring at this.
You can have all those.
You don't like chocolate?
Too sweet for me. Yes.
So the committee. I think the challenge is that what we do in the city is part of a bigger system. So I do believe, I mean, we can introduce the language, I think, as you've described, Aaron. I think it's going to come out one way or another. I'm not concerned about us not having the evaluation reflect on the work that we do in our city. So I'm happy to accept that language. I think it will work within this. However, if we want a separate RFP to do an evaluation of the system in Boulder and look at safe outdoor camping separately or other options, we need to hire our own consultant and not collaborate with HSBC. We have a budget for evaluation. It would take us, I think, a second budget, or we say we're just not participating in the HSBC evaluation.
In my mind, the idea of having a consultant to kind of look at this is really about giving them the freedom to kind of explore holistically what's going on, what are we doing here in the city. And so I like the idea of leaving the consultant open that way, but I think one of the really critical questions that I'm hearing from some of my colleagues is really around what can Boulder uniquely do? That, you know, we are a part of the system. There are clearly things that are missing within the system. There are probably things that are working well. And what is our component of that? And that to me feels like an interesting kind of sub-question to explore in this bigger system that is being thought about, potentially, you know, revamped with new recommendations. What's our unique component in there? And I don't know if that kind of
I mean, that was what I was trying to get at with the language I was throwing out there.
I think we can do our best to work with that suggestion.
So thanks, Nicole. Something else?
Yeah, sorry. I just had one more thing, because I think for me, this issue of the safe outdoor spaces, micro communities, whatever we want to call them, that really ties into the day center as well. And so for me, that discussion, like I would love to know where things are at, because my biggest concern, frankly, is this winter and what's coming. And if, you know, we don't have a space for people to be like in an emergency shelter kind of situation when it gets cold and all of that, do we need to be exploring some different options? And so for me, that is part of a sort of holistic conversation. And I'm not sure where exactly that fits in, but I think one thing that what piece of information I would like to have is, if it looks like we may not have a day center up and running by the time the cold weather hits, do we need to explore some different options for helping folks survive the winter? So, I mean, I guess, you know, could wait till September 28th, that seems, or 20th, that seems a little bit late. So if we know sooner that we're not going to have something up and running by cold weather, can we then bring it back to have a discussion about what our plan is?
Yeah, I think we'll certainly have a more defined schedule prior to September, the end of September, yes. Okay. And we'll be able to communicate that publicly through hotline as well.
Great point, Nicole. Thank you for that. So I put out some proposed direction to shape this RFP, and so I just want to see if council has interest in that direction and giving that direction. And so I guess I'll ask for nods. Are people interested in adding that into the RFP direction that we're giving?
So can we clarify, because I thought I heard Kurt say we can't add really what we're asking for to the county's RFP, that we would have to have our own independent. Is that not where we are?
I think we can do it through the county. I think we can use this proposal to identify the components that are, you know, related to the city work. If that changes through our conversation with HSBC, though, at our next meeting, I can let council know of any concerns that might come up.
I guess I would just add, and Kurt and I talked about this analogy, like in the legal world, you cannot represent a husband and wife in a divorce. Like, you know, if there's a conflict there, you really, you know, if it's not an amicable separation, you don't represent both parties. So I would want to understand that, like, whatever the subcontract is, we're really getting non-conflicted information about, like, what the gaps are that affect the city of Boulder that might be, you know, maybe adversarial with the county. So I think part of that has to be, like, the duty would run to the city of Boulder in that subcontract. So as long as that is in there, I'd be fine with it.
I think the only detail that I would add is we often talk about HSBC as the county. Yeah. HSBC is us, yeah, so us. We are part of that.
Okay, good enough.
On that one, I think we still need to come back to, are we doing a not a 5 to add SOS to the work plan? Like, are we adding that to a meeting coming up?
All right, let's get through this one if we can, please. So there was the direction that I stated on the record. Are majority of people interested in giving that direction to guide the RFP? So just like. Okay, so I'll see if I can get it right the second time. But give direction to add to the RFP an evaluation of safe outdoor spaces and other micro communities that could be utilized, and also to look at the unique circumstances and needs of Boulder as part of our homeless strategies and solutions.
To me, those were two kind of separate things. I think what I was just looking for was like a holistic view. What's Boulder's unique role in all of this, with a discussion of some of the safe outdoor spaces coming up in anticipation of winter, when we get an update on what's going on with the day center. So I think, can we split those?
How about I switch the order that might do it? So if we say that, examine Boulder's unique situation, needs, and gaps with respect to homeless services and solutions, and as part of that, evaluate the potential for safe outdoor spaces and micro communities. And this is just about the RFP. We can talk about, there are other things going on too.
Would the safe outdoor spaces discussion just be focused on City of Boulder, or is that within the county as well?
I mean, I'm asking for it about, it would be part of the whole county discussion.
So safe outdoor spaces would be focused to the City of Boulder, I believe, yes.
Okay. So, I mean, people can suggest amendments if they want, but we're also dragging on.
I would hope that the county or that HSBC also will be looking at SOS, but I'm going to semi-reluctantly vote for this because I don't think I'm going to get something better during my tenure on council. It's been 5 to 6 months since the retreat, and we didn't. I thought we were getting a consultant like right after the retreat, so I'm going to vote yes in hopes that this moves forward. That said, I think we were pretty crisp at the retreat. This was not going to hold up the SOS, so that part 2 is coming next.
Yeah. Okay, so I'll ask for nods. Are people comfortable with that direction? Like, we get kind of, okay, I got nods. So we got that direction. Thank you, Kurt, for talking that through. But I don't think we're done.
Well, just the second part, I think, of the retreat discussion was staff moving forward, aside from a consultant, with possibly prepping SOS, I think in anticipation of this year yet. And so, I think it'd be great to get an update in September, but it sounds like we need a more crisp request from staff to let us know what a work plan trade-off is and a timeline is. So my request would just be some sort of indication of, do we want to schedule that for next week or the week after, as soon as we can, to get an understanding of, did we add that to the work plan at the retreat, or are we adding it now, and what the trade-offs are.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure we're going to get a lot of clarity from what happened at the midterm check-in, and I appreciate that. And if others viewed it differently, I'm happy to relook at that. What I think would be helpful, actually, is just to move forward. And what I'm hearing is, can you bring sooner? What would it take? What would it look like to add this to the work plan that is not doing the work as much as scoping, a little bit of the scoping? And when I say scoping, it's timeline and resource and where we are in other work. And could we bring that to the council sooner? That's what I'm hearing. Is that accurate? So the question maybe, Kurt, is that something that we could, and maybe if that is the direction and we get that nod, if we can look at staff time and see how quickly we can bring that forward, we can work on that. I don't know if Kurt can commit right now to, I can have that ready in 2 weeks, right? Or what that looks like. But I hear the commitment or the ask is, can we bring that sooner than September, at the end of September, so that then council can take a final vote or a direction on, yes, we think that's worth it and we want to add it to the work plan. Is that what you would like us to do? Let's come back as soon as we can?
I'd be interested in that.
Mm-hmm.
So I need clarity on what we would be coming back with in a couple of weeks. Is this to have a wider discussion of if it goes on the work plan or not, or?
I believe, Kurt, that there is a desire to inquire whether or not, what it would take to put safe outdoor spaces, however that may be defined, right? That could be micro communities, that could be camps. What it would take to, what it would look like to have that on our work plan, and if there was a yes, right? And so that's the question.
Sure.
Is that clear?
And that could be at a high level, right? Like,
Yep.
we're not talking about a detailed every step of the plan, and could probably be an information item to let us know what that would be, that we could then use as part of a discussion.
I think we can do an IP maybe in a couple of weeks.
Okay,
Yeah.
that'd be really helpful.
Great.
Yeah, Nicole?
Can I just ask for kind of a specific thing there too? So I know you're coming to us to talk about 4 different things that have been started this year. I think one of the things that would be interesting to know is especially how does it impact on those 4 things?
Yeah.
So.
Yes.
Process clarification. If we get an IP, I think we do need to raise our hands at some point to this. So I don't know that an IP is the presentation we want it to come back in.
So I think the IP would give us an information, and then a council member could request it being brought forward for a not a 5 at a meeting.
Okay, can I just request that IP get hotlined so any community members who are watching can easily find that, and it will. Sometimes sometimes, let's say I didn't read the packet till today, I might not get all the way to the IP, and so like I want to make sure that is flagged. Would be helpful.
I believe we can respond instead of an IP in a hotline form. We have done that before. We can send a hotline out on what a scope would look like.
Even just saying, hey, check out the IP.
Yeah.
We will work it out.
Okay, Kurt, you've been very patient. Thank you for working all this through with us.
Thank you.
I think we're set for now. And with that, any final thoughts? We're going to give Tara a birthday present of ending before 10 p.m. It's at 9:30. I'll gavel us closed.